Chapter 2270, The Mysterious Rock, 2. So you were sent by Gongjing Exin. Tell me, what has Gongjing Exin offered you? I'll give you 10 times the amount. Jianchen remained composed and said calmly, You're working for Gongjing Exin for the various cultivation resources he's offering. I can give you whatever Gongjing Exin can give you, such as this divine hall. With a flip of his hand, a hand-sized divine hall appeared from his space ring. The two middle-aged men who had come to kill Jianchen never took him seriously from the beginning. However, when they saw the divine hall in Jianchen's hand, their eyes narrowed as they became overjoyed. 9th grade of the truth tier. It's actually at the 9th grade of the truth tier. You actually have a treasure like that on you? The two middle-aged men were extremely surprised. The divine hall was something they could not resist. Greed immediately filled their eyes as they lunged at Jianchen as quickly as they could. They wanted to take the divine hall for themselves. Jianchen's lips could not help but curl up into an undetectable sneer as he watched the two middle-aged men rush towards the divine hall. In the next moment, a pair of hands suddenly extended out from the divine hall, reaching towards the two of them with speed that seemed indescribable to the middle-aged men. The sudden occurrence made the expressions of both men change. However, it was already too late. The two hands grabbed their necks with lightning speed, and under their horrified gazes, it forcefully wrenched them into the divine hall. Gongjing Exin sure does have a high opinion of me. He actually sent 2 early god kings to deal with me, who's supposed to only be equivalent to a receival fighter, Jianchen sneered as he looked at the divine hall in his hand. Afterwards, he said to the structure, Hey ya, I'll leave the 2 of them to you. Jianchen's voice sounded in the divine hall clearly. Yes, Master, Heya responded politely from within the divine hall. Master, I feel like I'm going to break through soon, Heya said after a slight pause. You're going to break through? This soon? Jianchen was surprised. Once Heya broke through, he would directly reach the primordial realm. A primordial realm expert had once been an indomitable existence in his eyes. Now, one of his retainers was about to become a primordial realm expert, which amazed Jianchen. It's all because of Master's Flower of Ways. If it were not for the Flower of Ways and the various heavenly resources, I would have never touched on the boundary of the primordial realm so soon, Heya said in deep gratitude. After a moment of consideration, Jianchen said, The divine hall can't endure the disturbance you make when you break through. The situation is special right now. It's not a good time to break through. Heya, suppress your breakthrough temporarily. Yes, Master. Afterwards, Jianchen checked the surroundings. After he discovered that he had left no traces behind, he was about to leave. But at this moment, an extremely vague and mysterious presence appeared from the swamp below him. The presence was extremely weak and vague. If it were not for the fact that Jianchen's soul had fused with a sliver of true chaotic force, making it extremely powerful and sensitive, he would not have been able to sense the mysterious presence at all. This was because it was just too vague, so vague that even the senses of primordial realm souls would not be able to discover it. Jianchen suddenly looked at the swamp below him, and after a moment of hesitation, he dived in. A layer of milky white light formed a white, airtight barrier around him. The water and mud around him were pushed aside by radiant saint force along the way, allowing Jianchen to dive in. As he dived deeper and deeper, Jianchen became more and more astonished. The swamp was far deeper than he had imagined it to be. He felt that he had dived several dozen kilometers at the very least, but he still had not reached the bottom. The ordinary swamp seemed to lead straight into the ground. And the deeper he dived, the greater the pressure in the surroundings became. In the end, Jianchen was unable to keep up the barrier with radiant saint force alone, so he just dispersed all the radiant saint force. He did not use any energy at all, using his body to endure the pressure from the depths. In the end, after who knows how long, Jianchen dived several tens of thousand kilometers and finally hit solid ground. He arrived at the very depths of the swamp. There was a layer of extremely tough rock at the bottom of the swamp. Jianchen sensed around with his soul and finally found the thing responsible for the mysterious presence. It was actually a rock 4 feet wide. Jianchen expanded the senses of his soul in an attempt to investigate the contents of the rock. However, To his surprise, the senses of his soul told him the rock that was clearly right in front of him did not exist. It can only be discovered with the naked eye. This rock is not simple. Jianchen rubbed the rock gently. Afterwards, he shot out a strand of sword qi from his fingertip, scraping off a thin layer of powder from the surface of the rock. Afterwards, he took out the divine hull from his space ring and spread the powder on it. He thought, this powder should be able to conceal the divine hull and prevent people from finding it with the senses of their souls. Very soon, the tiny divine hull was covered with a thick layer of powder. Afterwards, with a thought, Jianchen vanished along with the rock. Only the divine hull covered in rock powder stood at the bottom of the swamp quietly. Jianchen silently appeared within the divine hull with the rock. He cleaned off the dust around the rock and began to study it carefully. The rock was cubical 4 feet in length, width, and depth. It was dark red and extremely tough. Even with Jianchen's current strength, he was unable to shatter it. From the surface, it seemed ordinary. Apart from being tough and undetectable with the senses of the soul, it did not stand out in any way. It did not even give off any pulses of energy. However, Jianchen was able to discover slivers of extremely obscure and mysterious presences radiating from the rock thanks to the extraordinary senses of his soul. He believed that no one else aside from himself could sense this presence. That even included the peak experts. "Heya, do you recognize this?" Jianchen called Heya over to identify the rock. But very soon, Heya shook his head. He had never seen or heard of a wondrous rock like this. Jianchen stared at the rock in thought for a while before making up his mind in the end. Sword qi flashed from the tip of his finger as he cut off a thin layer of rock with quite the effort. He studied it carefully in his hand. Chapter 2271. Fortune Jade. The rock was extremely strange. It did not seem to stand out at all when observed with the naked eye, and the senses of the soul were completely useless against it. As a result, Jianchen secretly used his soul that had fused with chaotic force to closely observe the tiny slice of rock in his hand. Very soon, he discovered in great surprise that a minuscule amount of the mysterious presence existed within the rock slice. At that moment, the remaining presence vanished at an extremely gradually rate. When the presence remaining reached a certain amount, Jianchen discovered that he could vaguely sense the rock slice with his soul. The rock slice was no longer invisible to the senses of the soul. "I see. The reason why the rock can avoid being detected by the soul is not because of how special the rock is itself. It's all because of the mysterious presence that has permeated the rock. As soon as I sliced away this piece of rock, the mysterious presence began to vanish gradually. It looks like the origins of this mysterious presence is hidden within the rock," Jianchen thought to himself. The light in his eyes flickered as he immediately got to work, chipping away at the rock. However, it was just too tough. The closer he got to the center, the tougher it became. Towards the end, Jianchen was only able to chip it away at an extremely slow rate even when using his full strength. Jianchen frowned at the sight of this. Since he knew the rock was not as extraordinary as he had imagined it to be, it also meant that the powder he spread on the divine hull would not be able to keep the structure hidden for long. Once the powder became useless, the peak experts who had gathered on the desolate plain would be able to discover the divine hull he had hidden at the bottom of the swamp easily. There's not much time left. Jianchen scraped off some new powder and spread it on the divine hull again. Afterwards, he drew the 9-star sword of heavenly ways without any hesitation and began to chip away at the rock with careful control over the sword. A day later, Jianchen finally reached the very center of the rock after replacing the powder on the divine hull several times. Immediately, an extremely resplendent light burst out. It was blinding and dazzling, like the most beautiful color in the world. Anyone who saw the light would become entranced by it. Along with the resplendent light, a light presence that could focus the souls of people expanded as well. It resonated with the laws of the world, causing them to tremble as if it was invoking the endless mysteries of the universe. Jianchen became completely stunned with the appearance of the somewhat familiar light. He stared at the shining jade within the rock in a daze as intense joy and disbelief filled his eyes. "It's Fortune Jade." It's actually fortune jade. Jianchen murmured blankly. At that moment, he was in emotional turmoil. Great surprise and delight had filled him completely. He knew exactly how precious fortune jade was. It was a unique treasure of the world. He had even learned from the sword spirits that the nirvanic immortal Exalt, known as the greatest expert of the vast immortals world, only possessed a piece of it, and it was not particularly big. It was only a third of the size of the Enata Grand Prime's fortune jade. Jianchen could not help but begin breathing heavily. He forcefully suppressed his excitement as he continued to swing the 9-star sword of heavenly ways, carefully controlling its power to carve away the rock around the fortune jade. Very soon, a complete piece of the fortune jade was presented before Jianchen. It was roughly the size of the projection he had previously seen on the 9th floor of the Enata Tower. The only difference was that the projection he saw was circular, shaped like a cushion, while the fortune jade before him was irregularly shaped and the size of a millstone. What a huge piece of fortune jade! It's probably the same size as the Enata Grand Prime's one. Jianchen became overjoyed when he stared at the fortune jade before him. However, he seemed to think of something and immediately stowed the fortune jade into a space ring before leaving the divine hall and returning to the swamp. At that moment, he could no longer care about whether the presence of the Enata Tower would be exposed or not. He directly took out the tower in the bottom of the swamp and tossed the fortune jade in there. Jianchen believed that something as precious as fortune jade could only be truly safe when stored in the Enata Tower. If he was elsewhere, he would have never been bold enough to take out the Enata Tower, as the risk of exposing himself would be far greater. It was much safer here as he could use the natural geography to his advantage. I hope that the presence of the Enata Tower won't be exposed, Jianchen prayed inside. Even though he concealed the tower's presence to the best of his ability, he did not have complete confidence. After all, the peak experts all possessed exceptional abilities. Their capabilities had exceeded Jianchen's realm of understanding. Suddenly, Jianchen noticed something and looked to the side. The light in his eyes flickered as he pushed the power of his soul to the limit. He actually discovered an extremely well-hidden concealing formation there. This is a natural formation, similar to the formation around where the ancient skywolf passed away that I accidentally barged into. They can only conceal, but they're flawless. All cultivators with formations like these basically only barge in accidentally. Jianchen distinguished the type of formation it was very soon with his special soul. At this moment, something happened. The mud that pressed against Jianchen in the surroundings began to churn violently. The powerful senses of a soul swept over with earth-shaking power, surging down from above. It approached the bottom of the swamp. Jianchen's face suddenly changed. He had Emo Tianyun's mask as a disguise and had no reason to worry about being exposed by the senses of the soul alone, but since it had come, it had definitely discovered something strange here. If he was discovered by the senses of the soul, there would be quite a lot of trouble. He might even face the risk of being completely exposed. Without any hesitation at all, Jianchen took a step and directly entered the concealing formation. As soon as Jianchen's figure vanished, the senses of the soul followed closely and reached the depths of the swamp. It moved about there as if it was searching for something. However, Jianchen was prepared beforehand. He left none of his presence there at all, so apart from the powder that he did not manage to clean up, he left no other traces at the bottom of the swamp. However, even though the presence within the powder had grown extremely thin, it had not dispersed entirely. Perhaps the minimal amount of presence was unable to hide anything from Jianchen, but to someone else, it was impossible for them to discover it with the senses of their soul as long as some of the presence remained. As a result, the terrifying senses of the soul failed to find the powder. It also failed to discover the natural concealing formation there. In the end, it returned without finding anything after circling the bottom of the swamp for a while. Chapter 2272. The corpses of ancient beasts. Jianchen was in no hurry to leave the concealing formation. Instead, he held his breath and concealed his presence, carefully hiding there and observing the situation at the bottom of the swamp. Under the protection of the natural concealing formation, he silently waited until the surging mud at the bottom of the swamp gradually settled down. Only then did he become relieved. He knew that the owner of the powerful senses of the soul had failed to find anything. Otherwise, the thing that had shot over would not have been as simple as the senses of their soul. It would be them in person. The senses of the soul seemed to have failed to discover the pile of powder I left there. If the powder was discovered, they would definitely know that someone has been here. If I was them, I'd definitely pay closer attention here or even visit this place in person, thought Jianchen as his eyes shone brighter and brighter. Originally, he believed the rock powder he discarded could no longer hide anything as the presence from the fortune jade had leaked away. After all, the rock powder was no longer able to hide from him. Only now did he suddenly realize that while he could sense the rock powder, that did not mean other experts could sense the power as well. If the layer of rock around the fortune jade was used properly, it would have unimaginable uses. It's just a pity that I've realized this too late. I've chipped off all the rock already, so the presence in them is constantly leaking away. They won't last for long. Jianchen was filled with regret. He sighed gently before quickly dismissing his thoughts. He temporarily put the matter of the fortune jade aside and began to study the world within the concealing formation seriously. There was only darkness as far as the eye could see, with no light at all. It was just completely pitch black. However, the darkness there did not affect Jianchen at all. His eyes shone brightly, directly piercing through the darkness and seeing the scene around him completely. Exposed before Jianchen was a long, narrow, and gloomy tunnel that led straight into the ground. The tunnel was twisted, spiraling down into the earth. It was impossible to see its bottom, which made it even more impossible to tell its depth. Jianchen sent out the senses of his soul instinctively, but to his surprise, the entire tunnel was filled with a mysterious energy that caused great obstruction to the senses of his soul. Even with his soul that had changed drastically after fusing with a sliver of chaotic force, having gained various unbelievable abilities, it was only able to expand 5 kilometers into the tunnel. He had no idea how deep the tunnel was. Obviously, he found nothing with the limited range of his soul. This place is not very simple at all. Maybe there's some unknown, astonishing secret hidden down there. Jianchen hesitated slightly as he stood within the narrow tunnel before beginning to make his way down. The underground tunnel hidden by a naturally occurring concealing formation had piqued Jianchen's interest. Jianchen used the steps to make his way down. Along the way, he maintained his great vigilance, observing the surroundings at all times. As a result, he did not move very quickly at all. It was impossible to have a sense over the flow of time in the dark tunnel. After who knows how long, Jianchen finally reached the end of the tunnel. He was deep underground. He glanced around. His eyes shone and pierced through the darkness, allowing him to see everything in the surroundings. All he saw was a huge cavern. He had no idea how many tens of thousand meters it was in height, nor did he know how many tens of thousand meters it was in length. He had no idea how deep it was either. Even Jianchen's eyes were unable to see the end of the cavern. As for the senses of his soul, the restraint here became even greater. The original 5 kilometers shrank to 1 kilometer. He could see further than that with his eyes. Suddenly, Jianchen's eyes narrowed slightly. The light in his eyes flickered as he stared straight ahead. He could vaguely see a colossal shadow crouching on the ground extremely far away. It was just too far away. With Jianchen's eyes alone, he was only able to see a blurry shadow. He was unable to tell what it was. Jianchen took a step and unleashed all the power in his chaotic body. With a flash, he appeared several kilometers away, rapidly hurrying into the distance. This place was extremely well hidden. He did not need to worry about the peak experts on the desolate plain discovering him, so there was no need for him to continue hiding his strength. Under Jianchen's full speed, he approached the huge shadow very soon. When he clearly saw what it was, he became completely stunned. It was a colossal, ancient beast, several 100,000 meters long. It lied on the ground without moving at all. It was a grand sight, several times larger than a mountain. As Jianchen stood next to the beast with his stature, he even seemed smaller than an ant. The ancient beast had evidently died long ago. It gave off no presence of life at all, and it was covered in shackles upon shackles. Each shackle radiated with the power of laws and was firmly wrapped around the ancient beast, plunging into its flesh. The other end of the chain directly led off towards the depths of the cavern. Jianchen became sterner and sterner as he studied the corpse of the ancient beast and the shackles on it. The ancient beast had died many years ago, but the tremendous vital energy within it had not run out yet. It remained as tremendous as an ocean. At this moment, the tremendous vital energy was being led into the depths of the cavern endlessly along the chain. Jianchen arrived by the corpse and slowly extended his hand to touch it. He wanted to study the internal situation of the corpse. The corpse was warm to the touch, not icy cold. However, before Jianchen could touch it properly, his face suddenly changed, and with a great jolt, he wrenched back his hand immediately. As if he was struck heavily, he staggered backwards. The ancient beast was just too powerful when it was still alive. Although it was dead now and reduced to a corpse, the tremendous vital energy within its body continued to circulate constantly. Just the regular circulation had sent Jianchen retreating. If it was not for reaching the major achievement of the chaotic body, he probably would have been heavily injured by that alone. So powerful! Jianchen was extremely shocked. He sensed his painful right arm that almost shattered from the huge burden as he was in awe. The ancient beast that had died many years ago and had its vital energy drained still possessed such terrifying might. Just how terrifying was it supposed to be when it was still alive then? Suddenly, Jianchen's eyes narrowed, and he saw another blurry shadow in the distance. It was colossal. With a single movement, Jianchen shot off like an arrow into the distance to see what was there. Very soon, he arrived before the second colossal shadow. He was completely taken back when he saw what it was. The shadow also happened to be a huge, ancient beast. He had no idea how long it had been dead for, and it was also surrounded by shackles upon shackles that plunged into the flesh. The shackles constantly drained away the tremendous vital energy and funneled it towards the depths of the cavern. What is this place? Jianchen was astounded. Both of these ancient beasts were extremely powerful and must have made a name for themselves when they were still alive, but they had been shackled underground on the desolate plain now, reduced to tools that provided vital energy. Chapter 2273, The Headless Ape. Just what is in the depths of this cavern? It actually needs the constant supply of vital energy from two powerful ancient beast corpses, Jianchen thought. He could not help but look towards the depths as he showed both surprise and doubt. In the end, Jianchen did not try to touch the two corpses recklessly. The two ancient beasts were just too powerful when they were alive. As such, even after their deaths, Jianchen still could not endure their residual might. Just the circulation of their vital energy could injure a few experts who had just reached the primordial realm. Afterwards, Jianchen continued his investigation in the huge cavern, and his shock grew greater. To his surprise, he discovered that there were far more than just two corpses. He discovered a total of 6 colossal corpses of ancient beasts in various places. Without any exception, the 6 corpses were all covered in shackles as their tremendous vital energy was drawn away endlessly, delivered into the depths of the cavern. The 6 corpses varied in shape, and they all originated from different species. There was a mountainous serpent dragon as well as a winged, golden dragon that stood as large as a planet. They were extremely powerful, where the pressure from their corpses seemed to be able to make the sky collapse and silence everything. What extravagance! Who arranged all of this? Jianchen was shocked. 6 corpses of terrifyingly powerful ancient beasts gathered together had quite the mental impact. He believed that any single one of them definitely would have been an invincible existence on the desolate plain if they were still alive, where no one could stop them. Unfortunately, they had already died many years ago. Continuing onwards, Jianchen discovered a 7th corpse several tens of thousand kilometers away very soon. It was a humanoid being. She seemed like a young woman with great beauty, standing several hundred meters tall. She gave off a supreme presence of invincibility as an undefeatable battle intent revolved around her. She seemed like a goddess of war. This person was clearly not human. A feathered pair of colossal, golden wings draped down her back naturally. They were extremely pretty. Even though she no longer bore the presence of life, every single feather shone with resplendent golden light. It was dazzling as powerful energy circulate within. However, her fate was also the most chilling. A metal chain stretched over from the depths of the cavern and split into three, piercing her dantian, heart, and the area between her eyes. The surging vital energy within her was constantly drained away by the metal chains that stretched towards the depths of the dwelling. Jian Chen became completely numb as he looked at the humanoid being that was hundreds of meters tall. He had completely fallen silent as his heart weighed heavily. After remaining there for a while, he continued on his way. Before long, he discovered an eighth corpse. The corpse belonged to a human expert. He had the appearance of a middle-aged man. He sat on the ground in golden robes as his eyes remained closed. A tremendous sense of righteousness revolved around the corpse. A metal chain had also been split into three here, piercing his dantian, heart, and the area between the eyes. The human expert had also died many years ago. He possessed no presence of life at all, only leaving behind the tremendous vital energy. Jian Chen had no idea how powerful the human expert was when he was still alive. Even though just a corpse remained, Jian Chen felt chills as his heart shivered when he stood before him. Clearly, the human expert's strength when he was still alive was no weaker than the 6 ancient beasts and the winged, humanoid being. Jian Chen stood several meters away as he stared at the human expert deeply. Sorrow filled his eyes. He knew that the human expert had not been someone sinful. The sense of righteousness that never dispersed was proof. He was definitely a straightforward man of righteousness. However, his fate was so chilling. He had been reduced to a tool to supply vital energy. Jian Chen felt grief from the bottom of his heart at this moment. However, he also knew that there was nothing he could do with his current strength. In the end, he bowed at the human expert deeply before leaving. Jian Chen continued on his way. He followed the chains and remained vigilant along the way, making his way towards the depths of the cavern. He seriously wanted to know just what was hidden in the depths of the cavern that required such terrifying amounts of vital energy. Before long, Jian Chen finally arrived at the depths. What he saw was a sea of blood. Terrifying vital energy shone with dazzling, blood-red light, dyeing the surroundings the same color. The crashing of waves constantly rang out from the sea of blood. The tremendous vital energy surged constantly in there, erupting with astonishing ripples of energy that possessed devastating might. Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed. He stared right ahead. He did not pay too much attention to the sea of blood. Instead, he focused on what was above the sea of blood. There was a huge ape covered in long, thick fur that hovered above the sea of blood without moving at all. The ape's fur was a dark gold. It lied there without moving at all and was missing a head. Only a colossal body remained. The ape had also died many years ago. The 8 chains gathered above the ape's corpse, vaguely forming a profound and complicated formation. It drew in the vital energy from the 8 corpses, and after being converted in the formation, it was poured into the ape. Jian Chen even discovered that the residual vital energy in the sea of blood below the ape's corpse poured into the corpse at an extremely gradual rate as well. It was slowly absorbed by the ape. The ape was not filled with a presence of death. Instead, it was brimming with life. Even though the life force was like nothing compared to the ape's shocking strength, it meant that the ape had not completely died yet at the very least. Its body still possessed a certain level of vitality. Has the tremendous vital energy been drained from the 8 great experts just to rear and support this headless ape that died long ago? Jian Chen was astounded as he stared at the ape closely. Who did all of this? Jian Chen looked at the cavern. He could already vaguely guess that someone was probably trying to revive the ape. Just nurturing the body of the ape required the corpses of 8 monstrously powerful experts. Then just how powerful was this ape with dark gold fur? Jian Chen took a step to approach the ape up ahead. He wanted to study it closer. However, when he reached 100 kilometers from the ape's corpse, terrifying vital energy erupted from the ape's body. Like a storm, it rushed towards Jian Chen in a single instance. Chapter 2274. The 8 experts. Jian Chen's face changed drastically. Without any hesitation, he retreated rapidly, but the vital energy was just too fast. In the end, it still struck Jianchen with great force. Spurt! Blood sprayed out from Jianchen's mouth as he was knocked away. The vital energy was just too terrifying. Even with the protection of the chaotic body, he still became quite injured. The eruption of energy from the ape's body immediately caused the sea of blood there to toss and turn. At the same time, ancient, lingering consciousnesses within the cavern awakened from their slumber as if they had been startled. Through his unique soul, Jianchen immediately sensed the consciousnesses awaken in the cavern. It made him become uneasy. Do not get within 100 kilometers of the ancient great ape. How many years has it been? Finally, a living being has come. It's a pity that he's too weak. The consciousnesses all awakened and emitted mental pulses that echoed through the cavern. 8 blurry, illusionary figures appeared around Jianchen. 2 of them were extremely familiar to Jianchen. The first one was a beautiful woman. She possessed a pair of golden wings on her back and seemed exactly the same as the 7th corpse he had discovered. The only difference was that the 7th corpse stood several hundred meters tall, while the figure before him was the size of a human. The second familiar figure was the human expert he saw that gave off a sense of righteousness. Jianchen glanced past the 6 other figures. They varied in age and gender, but they were all like apparitions as well. It was impossible for Jianchen not to realize that the 6 remaining figures were the 6 colossal beasts he saw at the very start. However, they had not presented themselves in their original forms but as humans. Junior Jianchen greets the 8 seniors. Jianchen immediately clasped his fist towards the 8 illusionary figures as he showed respect from the bottom of his heart. This was respect towards power because he knew the 8 figures possessed extremely terrifying power when they were still alive. They could easily unleash devastating might, where they could disperse a galaxy with the flip of a hand. The 8 experts all looked at Jianchen. As they studied Jianchen, they could not help but shake their heads. Undisguised disappointment filled their faces. Indeed, he's too weak. We've waited for so many years, yet only a junior as weak as this has come. Sigh, he has already awakened our lingering consciousnesses. We don't have much time left. It's impossible for our lingering consciousnesses to keep existing since then. Once we're awakened, we'll disperse before long. It's just a pity that he cannot fulfill our request. We are out of options, so let's still try it. The 8 experts discussed with one another as they showed much helplessness. Jianchen seemed to make out something from their conversation. He clasped his hands at the 8 experts and said, "Seniors, may I ask what you want me to do? If there's anywhere I am of use, and it is within my abilities, I will definitely assist you with all that I have." The illusionary figures of the 8 experts hovered in the air. After hearing Jianchen's words, they entered a short moment of thought. Afterwards, the human expert said, "You've already seen Gusta's body, so you must also understand that our existence is only to provide abundant vital energy to nourish Gusta's body." "Gusta? That headless ape?" Jianchen asked. "That's right. The name of the ape is Gusta. He's the most powerful king of the ancient great apes. He died many years ago, having been beheaded. Although he seemed like he's dead, he's not completely dead. A sliver of life still remains. The experts of the ancient great apes wholeheartedly want to revive Gusta, so the 8 of us were trapped here by the 2 other kings of the ancient great apes. They used an ancient secret technique to drain our vital energy so that they could revive Gusta," said the human expert. Jianchen came to a realization from that. Originally, he thought that the 8 experts had died in battle elsewhere before having their corpses being collected by someone and gathered here. He had never thought that the 8 of them had been trapped here while they were still alive. Every single one of the 8 experts was extremely powerful. Even after dying many years ago, they were still enough to make Jianchen shivered. He struggled to imagine just how powerful the people who were able to trap such terrifying experts here would be. At this moment, the winged woman said, "The ancient great apes want to use the 8 of us to revive their most powerful king. Naturally, we won't let them get what they wish. Not only will we prevent them from succeeding, but we'll completely destroy Gusta's body as well. However, the 8 of us are dead after all. All that remains is a sliver of consciousness that bears regret from our lives. We can't complete what needs to be done. The woman looked at Jian Qin deeply. As a result, we can only leave the matter of destroying Gusta's corpse to you. Jian Qin's heart sank when he heard that. He said bitterly, "Seniors, I may have to disappoint you. My strength is puny. I can't even approach Gusta's corpse, let alone destroy it." Jian Qin felt troubled. Even if he possessed the strength to destroy Gusta's body, he would not be willing to do so. This was because once he did that, he would have completely offended the ancient great apes. "You don't need to worry. We've already set up everything when we were still alive. We just don't have the power to carry it out ourselves." The human expert said, "We've already engraved many layers of forbidden formations within our bodies. Once it's activated, it'll connect all of our bodies, and the remaining vital energy will fuse together. Even though our vital energy has been constantly drained away during all these years and only a bare minimum remains, there's still more vital energy when you pour it all together compared to any one of us at our peak conditions. We'll use the terrifying vital energy to deal a powerful attack through the formations, which would be enough to destroy Gusta's body. My bloodline contains the power of corpses. The ancient great apes dares to murder me, so I will never let them have things easy. Not only will I destroy Gusta's body, but my power of curses will also use Gusta's bloodline as a medium to curse all the clansmen of the ancient great apes across space. It'll make all of them pay a heavy price." An old man with a hooked nose fumed among the 8 experts. The ancient great apes should become extinct. The figures from the other ancient beasts all said together. They were filled with hatred. "If I really do something like that, I probably won't be able to avoid being hunted down by the ancient great apes. That'll be both an arduous and fruitless matter for me to complete," said Jian Qin. Chapter 2275. The 8 Laws. You don't need to worry. We won't treat you unfairly. Moreover, you won't get hunted down by the experts of the ancient great apes because this cavern has already become filled with our formations. Coupled with the suppression from the presence of our bodies, it's impossible for any of your puny presence to linger. Moreover, our powerful consciousnesses from when we were still alive have interfered with the heavenly secrets here, disturbing the laws here. Hence, even abilities like turning back time will be rendered useless. Without any exaggeration, everything you do in this cavern will leave behind no traces at all. The experts of the ancient great apes naturally won't be able to find you," said the human expert. "If you help us, the 8 of us will give you a fortuitous encounter. It definitely won't be arduous and fruitless for you," said the winged woman. "A fortuitous encounter? May I ask what kind of fortuitous encounter?" Jian Qin became interested. He looked at the peak experts who must have been renowned when they were still alive. It was impossible for the fortuitous encounters they left behind to be disappointing. "We can give you our golden cores of laws." "Kid, I wonder if that's enough," a burly, red-haired, middle-aged man said. "Golden cores of laws." Jian Qin could not help but cry out when he heard that. Once an expert's comprehension of the laws of the world reached a certain level, it would result in a reserve of laws. This reserve was condensed from the laws of the world. It hid the mysteries of the laws of the world, which was why it was called a golden core of laws. "If I obtain your golden cores of laws, will I be able to reach the same level as you in a short amount of time?" Jian Qin was interested. The red-haired man chuckled from Jian Qin's ignorance. He bellowed out, "Kid, you really have let your imaginations run wild. Reaching our former level through a golden core of laws alone? Do you really think the laws of the world are that easy to comprehend? The comprehension of laws within a golden core of laws will only remain without dispersing through the maintenance of special ancient techniques. As a result, the golden cores of laws we've left behind have almost run dry, where the comprehension that remains is less than 1/10 of its peak condition. However, even with that being the case, a single golden core of laws can allow a deity to reach the primordial realm within 1,000 years. Apart from the golden cores of laws, we've prepared 3 portions of vital energy as well. The amount of energy within each portion should be able to increase your strength by quite a lot at your current level. Aside from that, we'll pass on our supreme secret techniques that we invented ourselves. We've spent a lengthy amount of time to perfect them, so we don't wish to see them become lost. The remaining experts said, laying down various benefits. It had to be mentioned that the remuneration they offered was extremely plentiful, tempting Jianchen deeply. He struggled to decline. Alright, I agree. What do I have to do now? Jianchen asked. We're only a sliver of consciousness now, and will truly disperse in the surroundings soon. In order to prevent you from going back on your word, swear to the laws of the world first. Alright, Jianchen immediately swore an oath. After he did so, he discovered that there seemed to be an invisible restraint around him. He knew that this was the bond of the oath, so he stopped thinking about it. Under the guidance of the 8 experts, he arrived beside their bodies. Afterwards, the 8 figures all formed seals with their hands, and in the next moment, 8 long streaks of golden light shot over and hovered before them. Jianchen looked at the 8 golden core of laws that shone brightly. Even though they seemed the same on the surface, they actually contained completely different laws. The 8 laws were the laws of curses, the laws of strength, the laws of corrosion, the laws of creation, the laws of fire, the laws of destruction, the laws of the sword, and the laws of space. The laws of the sword came from the righteous human expert. If you want to activate the formations we've cast down to destroy Gusta's body, you need to comprehend our laws first. Only then can you come in contact with our bodies and awaken the last portion of power hidden within them. And to awaken that power, you need to comprehend all the laws we've left behind to God King, because only such a level will be enough to awaken our power. Once the power within our bodies have been awakened, you need a primordial realm expert to pour energy into the center of the formation and activate the formations we've cast down. Once the formation is activated, our vital energy will fuse together under the influence of the formation and unleash a powerful strike to destroy Gusta's body, as well as the ancient great apes' plan to revive their most powerful king. The supreme secret techniques we've created are hidden within the golden core of laws. They've merged with the comprehension inside, so inheriting our golden core of laws means that you'll be able to grasp our secret techniques as well. Kid, are you ready? Get ready to inherit the power of our laws. The 8 experts said. They were about to fuse the golden core of laws into Jianchen. Hold on, you can't get me to inherit it all alone, right? Comprehending 8 laws simultaneously will affect my cultivation speed, Jianchen called out in a hurry to stop them. If he really had to comprehend the 8 laws, he would have to spend much more time on cultivation compared to before. There's only you, and the 8 laws is the only method to awaken the power within our bodies. As a result, only you can inherit the 8 laws. The 8 golden cores of laws can't be taken out either. Once they have been taken out, you won't be able to conceal them from the heavenly secrets no matter what you do. People will be able to discover you. Once the experts of the ancient great apes sense it, all of our setup will go to waste. Our consciousnesses are about to disperse. We can't wait for you to go out and find other people. As a result, we have no choice but to have you inherit the 8 laws alone. Hold on, who said I'm alone? With a thought, the Inanna Tower appeared, and Jianchen called out Kaya first. Afterwards, he stowed the Inanna Tower away and took out the divine hull. He called out, Qing Yishuan, hey ya, come out. Chapter 2276, Fortuitous Encounter? The Inanna Tower. I never thought you'd be carrying one of the 3 treasures of the Inanna Grand Prime, the Inanna Tower. The Inanna Tower is of the highest quality as well as one of the most powerful god artifacts in the world. I never thought it would become so damaged. The only people that can damage the Inanna Tower to such a degree must be one of the sovereigns of the world who has reached the limits of Grand Prime. Looking at the slashes on the Inanna Tower, the Inanna Grand Prime probably fought with the strongest expert of the Immortals world, the Nirvanic Immortal Exalt. It looks like a lot has happened in the Saints' world since we passed away. It's very likely that the infinite cataclysm descended, but none of that has got anything to do with us. The 8 experts all sighed emotionally when they saw the Inanna Tower. Clearly, even though they were just a lingering sliver of consciousness from their former lives, they still possessed all of their memories. Jianchen, where is this place? And who are they? Kaya asked in doubt as soon as she walked out of the Inanna Tower. She studied the huge cavern around her before looking at the 8 experts in the end. The light in her eyes flickered with surprise and uncertainty. For some reason, she felt a strange sense of familiarity from the figures of the 8 experts, as if she had seen them before. Kaya could swear that she had never seen them before, but she just happened to experience such a feeling. Jianchen gave Kaya a simple explanation, giving her a rough understanding of what had happened here. Afterwards, Heya and Qin Yishuan emerged from the divine hall as well. Heya's presence was much more powerful and denser than before. He had made huge advances during his secluded cultivation. With the assistance of all the cultivation resources and the flower of ways from Jianchen, Heya had reached the very peak of God King. He was preparing to break through to the primordial realm now. As soon as Heya emerged from the divine hall, he arrived behind Jianchen. Even though he was very curious about this place, he did not ask anything at all. He truly treated himself as a servant. As for Qin Yishuan, she bit her lip gently. She glanced at Jianchen and Kaya and said nothing at all. She arrived behind Jianchen silently and stood beside Heya. Jianchen still had his disguise on right now, and so did Kaya. Hence, Qin Yishuan failed to realize their real identities even now. However, as soon as Qin Yishuan arrived behind Jianchen, she was pulled in front of him. Jianchen said nothing at all and pushed her forward. He said to the human expert, "Senior, she also comprehends the laws of the sword. Can she inherit your legacy?" The limits of the comprehension within the golden cores of laws was less than 1/10 of what the 8 experts possessed when they were still alive. Let alone reaching their former level of cultivation, but even breaking through to chaotic prime would be wishful thinking with the golden cores of laws alone. It would basically only be enough to reach the primordial realm. Jianchen's comprehension of the laws of the sword had reached late God King already. He only needed to take another step, and he would reach the primordial realm. Not only did his soul change, allowing him to comprehend the laws of the world with greater clarity now, but he also possessed the fortune jade. He believed that this entire process would not take him long. As a result, it would be a little too wasteful if he used the golden core of laws with the laws of the sword. If Qin Yishuan inherited it, not only would he be able to assist his acquaintance, but he would be able to use the golden core of laws to its full capacity as well. Qin Yishuan was pushed forwards by Jianchen. She had no idea what was going on. Afterwards, when she heard Jianchen mention the legacy, she immediately became stunned. She was at a loss. The illusionary human expert who hovered in the air looked at Qin Yishuan. After studying her slightly, he nodded in satisfaction. She can. He did not even ask for Qin Yishuan's agreement. With that, the golden core of laws hovering before him turned into a golden streak of light and shot into Qin Yishuan's head. Immediately, Qin Yishuan exploded with golden light. Extremely pure strands of power from the laws of the sword revolved around her, causing her to close her eyes uncontrollably and enter a state of comprehension. She was accepting the legacy. As if the human expert's final wish had been completed, he smiled in liberation, and his illusionary body began to vanish. A while later, it had completely dispersed. Jianchen secretly sighed when he looked at how the human expert's consciousness had vanished. He knew that a righteous human expert had completely disappeared from the world. Kaya, you comprehend the laws of creation, destruction, and fire, so you should inherit those 3 laws. Jianchen dismissed his thoughts and said to Kaya. However, Kaya remained calm. She did not become excited at all. She glanced at the 3 golden cores of laws indifferently and said, "I don't need it. It's best if you inherit it." Kaya. Jianchen frowned. Jianchen, you should know that my comprehension of laws is different from others, and there's only a limited amount of comprehension remaining in these golden cores of laws. They really won't be of any use to me, Kaya said seriously. Jianchen thought of the possibility that Kaya was the reincarnation of a certain expert from that, and he no longer said anything more. Then he looked at Heya and asked him which law he wanted to inherit. His talent is far too ordinary. Let alone the fact that it'll be a huge waste if we give him a golden core of laws, but it'll be detrimental to him as well to comprehend 2 laws of the same time with his talent. That's right. He only needs to focus on comprehending his own law with his talent. Before he becomes a Grand Prime, there's no need to comprehend a second law. The 7 experts objected. Thank you for your bestowment, Master, but I think it's better to follow the recommendations of the seniors and focus on my own law, Heiya added as well. Fair enough, Jianchen sighed gently. Heiya's talent was indeed nothing special. It was obvious with how he had never made it onto the God King's throne even after becoming a peak God King. He also knew that even when Heiya reached the primordial realm, he would only be a regular primordial realm expert. The top 10 of the God King's throne would be able to hold their ground against him. Even Shui Yunlan could defeat him if she was still a God King. I'll inherit the 7 remaining laws then, Jianchen said helplessly. Afterwards, he let Kaiya and Qin Yishuan, who was still in a state of comprehension, into the Inata Tower and let Heiya back into the Divine Hall. He formally accepted the legacies from the 7 experts. Under the control of the 7 experts, the 7 shining golden cores of laws shot into Jianchen's forehead as streaks of light. In that instance, Jianchen shone brightly. The power of the 7 laws revolved around him as the laws of the world seemed to resonate. The consciousnesses of the 7 experts did not disperse. They remained in the surroundings, staring straight at Jianchen. Excitement and eagerness filled their faces. This kid's soul is extremely strange. I hope we can benefit from his soul. Moreover, he cultivates the chaotic body and has attained quite the accomplishment with it. His vital energy is extremely dense. It's enough to nourish the fragment of our souls. It's just a pity that Swordmaster Yunqi was simply too stubborn, unwilling to follow us. He has truly died. I can sense that this kid's soul seems to be able to contain all the laws of the world. That's extremely rare. If we can obtain a fragment of his soul and refine it into our own souls, it'll be a huge fortuitous encounter without a doubt. Everyone will meet again in the future. I'll be leaving first. Afterwards, the huge cavern fell completely silent. The consciousnesses of the 7 experts all dispersed in the surroundings. Chapter 2277. Rapid advance. Having already entered a state of comprehension, Jianchen did not seem to hear the conversation between the 7 experts. Currently, a layer of dazzling golden light surrounded him. Various laws revolved around him as he entered a state of selflessness where he devoted himself to the comprehension of laws. The laws of creation, destruction, fire, strength, space, corrosion, and curses would appear from time to time, enveloping him. It made the space around him resonate with the laws of the world. Comprehending 7 different laws simultaneously was an especially great challenge to any cultivator or even impossible. Not only did it require an absolutely astonishing aptitude for comprehension, but there was also a need for an extremely great affinity with the laws of the world. However, it did not seem too difficult for Jianchen. Jianchen was able to sense all 3,000 laws. Coupled with the unbelievable transformation of his soul after fusing with the strand of true chaotic force, he became even closer to the laws of the world and was able to sense them with even greater clarity. As a result, Jianchen basically had no difficulties in comprehending the 7 laws. Moreover, he had already grasped the laws of destruction out of the 7 laws, so he only truly needed to comprehend the remaining 6. In just 7 days, Jianchen comprehended the first law. He grasped the laws of creation and reached a rudimentary level of comprehension that would be akin to deities. Jianchen immediately stopped comprehending the laws of creation after reaching this rudimentary level, turning his attention to a second law. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed, and Jianchen finally roused from cultivation. Apart from the laws of destruction, he had comprehended all 6 remaining laws during that time. They had all formally reached the level of deity. He had grasped them all. 7 golden core of laws hovered silently within his soul. The power within them had not decreased significantly. Clearly, Jianchen had not depleted the golden core of laws by much at all when he was comprehending the 6 new laws. The 8 seniors said that a single golden core of laws is enough for a deity to reach the primordial realm in 1,000 years. However, I don't need 1,000 years at all to comprehend them to the primordial realm. Jianchen opened his eyes, and the light in them flickered. He showed great confidence before taking out the piece of fortune jade he had placed in the Unetta Tower. Fortune jade, it'll all up to you for me to comprehend all these laws to God King. Undisguised excitement filled Jian Chen's face as he looked at the shining fortune jade. Afterwards, he placed the fortune jade on the ground and sat down on it. He began to comprehend the laws of the world. Now, he needed to raise his comprehension of the laws from deity to God King. Only with the power of God King level laws would he be able to awaken the final amount of power hidden within the 8 experts. Immediately, a profound power of fortune radiated out from below along with the presence of laws. Jian Chen promptly felt like he had ingested some comprehension tea. His head cleared up as many ideas flickered through his head. Immediately, he felt his affinity for comprehension skyrocket, where the profound laws of the world became easier to sense and understand. My laws of destruction have already reached late over God. I only need one more step to break through to God King, so let's raise the laws of destruction first, Jian Chen thought. Afterwards, his consciousness began to revolve around the golden core of laws for the laws of destruction in his soul, using what was hidden in there to comprehend. Strands of pure power of laws drifted out from the golden core of laws. Jian Chen did not absorb the power of laws directly. Instead, he used them to comprehend the truths of the world within. Whenever he came to a realization about something, a sliver of the power would fuse into his soul, truly absorbing it. It allowed his comprehension of the laws of destruction to constantly deepen. However, before long, Jian Chen suddenly felt agitated. He instinctively stopped cultivating. When he opened his eyes, he was already frowning. Jian Chen sat on the fortune jade as the resplendent power of fortune completely enveloped him. He sank into his thoughts with his eyes opened. He had entered a state of selflessness as he cultivated, having truly settled down like still water. However, he had suddenly felt agitated for no reason. Moreover, the agitation immediately vanished completely after he stopped cultivating. Jian Chen felt that something was off. He sat on the fortune jade in thought for a very long time as the light in his eyes flickered uneasily. Afterwards, he pushed the sensitivity of the senses of his soul to the limit to inspect every nook and cranny of his body. The 7 golden cores of laws in his soul became his point of focus. In the end, he failed to find any irregularities. Jian Chen thought silently. A strange light flickered through his eyes, and his gaze gradually deepened. A while later, he closed his eyes and continued to comprehend the laws of destruction. Afterwards, he did not feel agitated again, allowing him to comprehend the laws of destruction extraordinarily smoothly. A month later, the power of God King level laws descended and enveloped Jian Chen. His laws of destruction had finally reached God King. Now, his laws of the sword and laws of destruction had both reached the level of God King. His laws of the sword was already at late God King, equivalent to the great perfection of sword spirit. If he took one more step, he would reach the primordial realm, which was equivalent to sword immortal. However, Jian Chen also knew that this step could not be taken easily. Even though his soul was different from before, which allowed him to comprehend the laws of the world with greater clarity, reaching sword immortal was still not something he could achieve in a single day even with the assistance of the fortune jade. The further he went, the more difficult the comprehension and breakthroughs of laws would become. He needed to accumulate understanding and comprehension over time. There really is a secret technique hidden within the golden core of laws. It's just that this secret technique is of quite a high grade. Grasping it will require quite a lot of time for comprehension, but I don't have that time right now. Whatever, I'll just comprehend the secret technique in the future. Let's continue comprehending the laws, thought Jian Chen. He did not stop at all, continuing his comprehension of a second law, the laws of space. In Jian Chen's opinion, since he had already grasped the laws of the sword and the laws of destruction, he was not in need of offensive laws. As a result, out of the remaining laws, the laws of space would clearly be more useful. He had to start from scratch with comprehending the laws of space. Naturally, he would not be able to comprehend it as quickly as the laws of destruction. However, even with that being the case, He only used half a year to reach the level of God Kings with the laws of space. Of course, this was not indicative of how impressive Jian Chen's talent was. Aside from the crucial assistance of the Fortune Jade, the greatest reason why he could advance so fast was because of the golden core of laws. Jian Chen had only achieved this thanks to the golden core of laws. Like a miracle, he comprehended the law from its rudimentary level to God King in a single sitting. Spatial devouring technique. Cosmos shift. Jian Chen had also inherited the two spatial secret techniques after comprehending the laws of space to God King. They were both of extremely high grades. The spatial devouring technique was an offensive technique, while Cosmos shift seemed more like a technique for escape from its description. Chapter 2278. The storm continues. Through the powers of space, break free from the restraints of the world and stride over the flow of time to travel hundreds of million kilometers away. Jian Chen's eyes lit up from the description of the technique as he became interested. He discovered that not only was Cosmos shift an extremely powerful method of escape, but it was also an impressive method for traveling. It could let him cross hundreds of million kilometers in an instance. That was basically across an entire Great Plain. Some Great Plains were not even hundreds of million kilometers across. Clearly, this secret technique was more than suitable for traveling in outer space. It would even save him from using teleportation formations across planes, allowing him to save a great sum of 5-colored divine crystals. I feel like this Cosmos shift is far more difficult to use than the spatial devouring technique. It's just far too hard to use it with the comprehension of laws at the level of God Kings. I even doubt whether I can gain a rudimentary grasp over the technique with my level of laws of space. But without a single doubt, it'll take an extremely long time to master it, Jian Chen thought. The 8 experts were far too terrifying when they were still alive. Their level of cultivation had exceeded his imagination. Supreme secret techniques they created would naturally be of an impressive quality. The mysteries of the world that the secret techniques used were just too profound to him right now. As a result, it was impossible for him to gain a rudimentary grasp over these secret techniques as easily as he did with the radiant arts. There's still around a year before the competition between the candidates begins. I'll take advantage of this time and comprehend a few more laws, thought Jian Chen before continuing to comprehend a law. Time passed silently. In the blink of an eye, another half a year went by. On this day, Jian Chen roused from his selfless state of cultivation, and God King level laws revolved around him once again. With this half a year of comprehension, his laws of strength had reached early God King. Just as I had expected, the laws of strength can indeed amplify my chaotic force. If I fuse the laws of strength into my chaotic body will become 30% stronger. This increases not just in toughness but in brute strength as well. Jian Chen secretly rejoiced when he sensed the changes that the laws of strength had brought him. And that's only the laws of strength at early God King. In the future, as my comprehension of the laws of strength rapidly deepen, and my cultivation rapidly increases, the amplifying effect will become greater and greater as well. Jian Chen's eyes shone brightly. The help that the laws of strength brought to him was just too great. It directly increased his battle prowess. At that moment, he was even tempted to use the golden core of laws to comprehend the laws of strength to peak God King in a single breath. He believed that once the laws of strength reached late God King, his chaotic body would definitely be amplified by more than 30%. However, he did not have that much time left now. Out of the 7 laws, I've already comprehended the laws of destruction, space, and strength to God King. All that remains is the laws of creation, fire, corrosion, and curses. Kaya happens to have grasped the laws of creation and fire, and they also happen to be at God King. I won't worry about the laws of creation and fire for now. Let's comprehend the laws of corrosion and curses first. Jian Chen ended up choosing the laws of curses after a moment of thought. Jian Chen concentrated on cultivation and paid no attention to other matters. As he was furiously raising his strength, the desolate plain had not been peaceful at all. After several years of buildup, the upheaval caused by Jian Chen on the desolate plain did not decrease. It only grew stronger. More and more peak experts and organizations arrived on the desolate plain, searching for Jian Chen's whereabouts on the desolate plain under the excuse of sharing the burden with the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Not only did they flip through the entire desolate plain, but even the bottom of the swamp where Jian Chen found the fortune jade was not spared. Even all the peak organizations that belonged on the desolate plain had been searched countless times. Even the radiant Saint Hall that stood above the clouds had been visited by outsiders several times. They even almost ended up entering the Tower of Radiance, causing the leader of the radiant Saint Hall to fly into a furious rage. He almost ended up fighting with the outsiders. Similar occurrences happened with the other peak organizations on the desolate plain. Many of their forbidden grounds that had been deemed as an absolute secret had almost been intruded on by the outsiders. During this time, the reckless actions of the outsiders had created a mess across the entire plain. Many organizations of various sizes complained about it. However, with the current situation, the native organizations were helpless. They felt wronged, but there was nothing they could do about it. This was because as the outsiders and foreign clans and organizations rapidly increased in number, their strength gradually reached a point where they could suppress all the native organizations on the desolate plain. Moreover, they used the heavenly palace of Bisheng as an excuse, which made the native organizations powerless. However, these outsiders gradually became flustered after failing to find Jian Chen even after so long. A rumor that Jian Chen had already fled the desolate plain gradually made its way around. The only place that hasn't been searched on the desolate plain is where the celestial sword saint cultivates. The foreign peak experts would communicate with one another frequently and discuss their thoughts. At that moment, some people began suspecting the celestial sword saint. Do you think Jian Chen is hiding where the celestial sword saint cultivates? Do we have to go disturb the celestial sword saint? The celestial sword saint is not an existence you'd want to provoke. The expressions of all the foreign experts changed when the celestial sword saint was mentioned. They frowned. The celestial sword saint is indeed not someone you'd want to provoke, but we're assisting the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng, helping her find her master's Aneta tower sooner. I refuse to believe that this celestial sword saint would be bold enough to offend the first majesty. We all know exactly how terrifying she is. Alright, let's gather some people and go visit the celestial sword saint. Immediately, the outsiders quickly gathered over a dozen peak experts and went to where the celestial sword saint cultivated. The celestial sword saint was an extremely great existence on the desolate plain. He was extremely powerful, possessing the title of the greatest expert on the desolate plain for many years. Across the entire plain, there were no organizations that dared to stand up to the celestial sword saint. The Sword God Mountains was an ancient mountain range on the desolate plain. Many sword-like mountains stood there. The celestial sword saint spent most of his time cultivating there, without paying any attention to the matters around him. On this day, over a dozen foreign experts came together. They were extremely polite and had come under the guise of visiting the celestial sword saint. They wanted to search the Sword God Mountains for Jian Chen. Piss off! In the next moment, a deafening roar boomed out from the depths of the mountain. It rang out in a magnificent manner, where the terrifying sound's waves even cracked space. The voice was so powerful that it rang across the entire desolate plain. A terrifyingly powerful sword intent radiated out from the depths of the Sword God Mountains with the voice. At that moment, the entire world seemed to have become a domain of sword chi. The expressions of all the peak experts changed. They were immediately forced back in a stagger. Celestial Sword Saint, we're only helping the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. Why do you get in our way? A middle-aged man called out from among the foreign experts. The person you're looking for isn't here. If you dare to say something else, I'll take your head, the celestial sword saint replied in an overbearing manner. The faces of the experts darkened and paled, but in the end, none of them dared to say anything more. They left in low spirits. Chapter 2279. The news from the Azure Pern King. These outsiders are becoming more and more reckless. They even went to the celestial sword saint's Sword God Mountains. They are far too confident. They think they can do whatever they want, striking fear in everyone's hearts as long as they mention the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. However, they need to consider who the celestial sword saint is. These outsiders can indeed overwhelm us if they work together, but the celestial sword saint has never taken them seriously. These outsiders sure were cautious. They visited the Sword God Mountains politely and did not barge in forcefully. Otherwise, I think we will see over a dozen heads fly into the air. Sigh, what a pity. The Celestial Sword Saint didn't actually take action. When the Celestial Sword Saint demonstrated his courage and forced the peak experts to retreat in low spirits, the native experts and important figures of various organizations all allowed their senses of their souls to meet. They discussed with one another, feeling extremely satisfied. There was also a tiny portion of pity. In the past few days, the peak organizations that originally reigned over the desolate plain, had been searched fearlessly by these outsiders under the name of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. They had already begun to nurse grievances as they became furious over the whole matter. However, they were helpless because of their strength and their fear towards the first majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. The Celestial Sword Saint's impressive reply finally allowed these peak organizations to feel proud and satisfied again. It's just a pity that the Celestial Sword Saint only cares about cultivation and none of the worldly matters, making it impossible for him to interfere with any of the conflicts on the desolate plain. Otherwise, these outsiders would not act so brazenly as long as he stood forward. What do you know? He's what you truly call a sage who stands above all. Some peak experts expressed their disappointment over how the Celestial Sword Saint allowed these outsiders to act as they pleased on the desolate plain. When the outsiders truly sensed the Celestial Sword Saint's strength, they became slightly more obedient, unwilling to set foot in the Sword God Mountains again. However, their search for Jian Qin still continued. 3 months later, when there were only 2 months until the competition between the candidates for chosen saint, the outsiders finally gradually lost their patience. There were so many of them, and they had turned over every stone on the desolate plain several times, yet they had still failed to find any trace of Jian Qin. Gradually, more and more of them began to waver and believe the rumor that Jian Qin had already fled the desolate plain. As a result, a few clans were ready to pull out from the search on the desolate plain. Jian Qin is still on the desolate plain. However, just when they were about to leave, a voice rang out far and wide from outer space. The azure-robed, sheet-white Azure Pern King hovered beyond the desolate plain. His eyes were vicious as heavy killing intent revolved around him. Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance, how are you certain that Jian Qin is on the desolate plain? An outsider asked from the desolate plain. He did not speak loudly, but it crossed the huge distance, allowing the Azure Pern King to hear his words clearly. I was once in possession of Jian Qin's blood. With the blood, I used secret techniques several times to search for him. Even though I no longer have the blood, I still have a vague sense of his traces, which is why I'm certain that Jian Qin is still on the desolate plain, said the Azure Pern King. Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance, where is Jian Qin then? The outsiders on the desolate plain all became interested when they heard that. They had searched for so long and finally, they were about to find where Jian Qin was hidden. However, many of the experts felt admiration towards Jian Qin at the same time. He was a puny god king, yet he could avoid so many peak experts until now. Not everyone could accomplish something like that. If I still had a droplet of Jian Qin's blood, it would be very easy to find him on the desolate plain. However, I've already lost the blood now. My ability to sense him comes from the last time I used the secret technique. However, this feeling has become fainter and fainter. It'll vanish completely within 3 years at most, the Azure Pern King said from outer space. He knew that once he completely lost track of Jian Qin, it would truly be impossible for him to find Jian Qin in the vast saint's world. As a result, having run out of options, he could only reveal this information. Jian Qin, even if I can't get the N at a tower, I will never leave you alive, the Azure Pern King thought to himself. He was a vengeful person. Once someone wronged him, he would never miss a single chance to kill them unless they were powerful to the point where he could do nothing to them like the Celestial Sword Saint. Even towards the Celestial Sword Saint, he harbored bitter resentment. If there was a day where he was more powerful than the former, or if the opportunity ever presented itself, he would attack the celestial sword saint without any hesitation. And who was that black-robed man accompanying Jian Qin in the miniature world before? Once the matters here end, I'll definitely find out about your true identity, thought the Azure Prince King. He also bore grudges towards Mo Tianyun from being hunted down last time. The news from the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance immediately made all the outsiders dismiss the thought of retreating, while the rumor that Jian Qin had already left the desolate plain vanished. Immediately, the experts on the desolate plain began to search for Jian Qin one last time in greater detail. Jian Qin has hidden very well. He has used a treasure to disguise his identity and presence. It's impossible to find him through regular methods. However, no matter how he hides, it's very difficult for him to disguise his blood. It's impossible to peer into Jian Qin's past and future, but even if that's the case, we'll just search all the God Kings and Infinite Primes on the desolate plain one by one. As long as we find someone that we cannot peer into, we'll interrogate them immediately. That's right. We'll go through them one by one and do one last search. If we fail to find him after the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance's connection to Jian Qin vanishes, we'll give up on it then. Let's take action personally and personally peer into those who are God Kings or above. We'll directly check the blood of those below God Kings, just in case he has concealed his strength and mingled among the weaker cultivators. I refuse to believe we can't find him like this. Let's do it for the last time then. Who finds Jian Qin and obtains the Anata Tower in the end will be up to luck. The peak experts made up their minds. After all, the desolate plain was so vast, and there were so many God Kings. Even with how great their cultivations were, checking every single God King would be exhausting for them. This time, they had truly made up their minds. Chapter 2280, Vital Energy. While the peak experts went to extreme means to find Jian Qin, the cause of all of this, Jian Qin, hid in the cavern underground as he devoted himself to cultivation. He was completely unaware of his surroundings, focusing everything on comprehending the laws of curses. Invisible laws of the world revolved in his surroundings, giving off the power of curses. It was filled with the mysteries of laws, as if all the curses in the world were hidden within. Below him, there was a piece of fortune jade shaped like a grindstone. It shone with dazzling light as it gave off the power of fortune, filling his soul and allowing his mind to become flexible and unpredictable. It resonated with the world to a greater extent, becoming even closer to the laws. Cultivation was timeless. After who knows how long, a formation engraved in the ground around the fortune jade suddenly lit up. It gave off a wondrous pulse, allowing Jian Qin to gradually rouse from cultivation. As soon as he stopped cultivating, the power of curses around him immediately vanished. It had completely disappeared. It was a rousing formation, a simple formation cast down by Jian Qin. It could rouse him from cultivation at a certain set time, preventing him from becoming too involved with cultivation and missing out on the opportunity to enter the Tower of Radiance. Jian Qin slowly opened his eyes. He glanced at the formation he cast down on the ground indifferently and murmured softly, "There are still 2 months left. I can't keep comprehending laws." His laws of curses did not reach God King like his laws of strength and his laws of space after the few months of comprehension. It remained at mid over God. There was just far too little time. It was impossible for him to comprehend the laws of curses from deity to God King in one sitting within 4 short months. Jian Qin stood up from the fortune jade and sent the senses of his soul into the Anata Tower. Qing Yixuan sat on the ground on the 9th floor with her eyes closed as she comprehended the laws of the sword. Sharp strands of sword qi gathered as the power of the laws of the sword revolved around her. Jian Qin did not enter the Anata Tower. Instead, he checked on Qing Yixuan's situation with the senses of his soul. He silently observed Qing Yixuan, who had become unaware of her surroundings and could not help but think about the sudden agitation he experienced when he first began comprehending the laws. Immediately, the light in his eyes flickered with uncertainty. He was no ordinary person but a powerful God King who had grasped a portion of the truths of the world, having comprehended multiple laws. More importantly, he was a powerful cultivator who could kill infinite primes. He would never experience any feelings for no reason, so he was certain that something bad had happened. However, he was unable to find the source no matter how hard he searched or thought about it. As a result, he could only bury the matter in his heart. Now that he saw Qin Yishuan inherit the golden core of laws from the human expert, Jianchen could not help but connect it to the agitation he experienced before. For a time, he had no idea whether it was a blessing or a curse for Qin Yishuan to inherit one of the laws from the 8 experts. However, when he thought about how the righteous presence never dispersed from the human expert even after death, he stopped worrying. He knew that even if there was a scheme involving the golden cores of laws, bearing other intentions, at the very least, the human expert would never do something like that, as it did not match up to his righteous bearing at all. At Qin Yishuan's current rate, she'll probably need over 200 years before she becomes a god king, Jianchen observed Qin Yishuan silently. After hesitating slightly, he placed the fortune jade under her. He could control a portion of the Anata Tower's power now, basically making him half a master of the Anata Tower. As a result, he was able to do something like that without disturbing Qin Yishuan at all. I hope that she can reach God King as soon as possible. Jianchen held anticipation for Qin Yishuan. Just when the senses of his soul were about to recede from the Anata Tower, Kaya suddenly appeared on the 9th floor. As if she knew Jianchen's senses were present, she said, "Jianchen, I want to spend some time in the cavern." Jianchen already knew that the 9 floors within the Anata Tower were unable to obstruct Kaya, so he was not surprised by her sudden appearance at all. Afterwards, Jianchen let Kaya out of the Anata Tower with a thought. As soon as Kaya appeared in the cavern, she studied the shackled bodies of the 8 experts before looking towards the depths of the cavern, where the strongest king of the ancient great apes, Gusta, was located. She sank into her thoughts. "Kaya, have you discovered something?" Jianchen asked when he noticed Kaya's unusual behavior. Kaya shook her head. A sliver of bewilderment filled her eyes. She said nothing. Jianchen did not keep asking. He said to her, "Then be careful. I'll go retrieve the 3 portions of vital energy." Afterwards, Jianchen left Kaya alone and directly flew towards the ancient beasts. The 3 portions of vital energy had been promised to him by 3 of the 8 experts. The original forms of the 3 were all colossal ancient beasts. The method to collect the vital energy had been embedded in Jianchen's mind as he inherited their legacy. Before long, Jianchen arrived before one of the ancient beasts. He stood before its huge head and used a secret technique through the power of laws from the legacy before gently pressing his hand on its head, drawing out the vital energy hidden within the beast's body. Soon, a fist-sized ball of pure vital energy appeared in Jianchen's hand. It radiated with powerful energy. Jianchen's eyes shone brightly as he looked at the portion of vital energy. There was not a lot of vital energy, but its purity had completely exceeded his imaginations. The terrifying energy within it astonished him. What terrifying energy ripples! Just the energy within a single portion is enough to raise the chaotic body from the 12th layer to the 13th with some left over. Jianchen was amazed. He thought about the tremendous amount of resources he had to spend to make the breakthrough to the 13th layer, yet now, the vital energy in his hands was more than enough to cover all of it. This portion of vital energy is tremendous to me, but it's not even 1/10,000th of the ancient beast when it was still alive, Jianchen thought. When he drew out the portion, the tremendous vital energy within the ancient beast did not decrease at all. It was just that the remaining vital energy had been sealed in by the shackles, preventing him from extracting it. The portion he extracted had not been sealed up by the shackles because the ancient beast had left it behind when it was still alive. Afterwards, Jianchen approached the other 2 ancient beasts and used various methods to obtain 2 more portions of vital energy. Every portion was extremely powerful, and the energy contained was so tremendous that it was enough to fulfill his needs to break through from the 12th layer to the 13th layer. Unfortunately, my chaotic body has already reached the 13th layer. I need 10 times more energy to break through to the 14th layer compared to the 13th layer. Chapter 2281, Leaving the Cavern, Whatever, I'll absorb these 3 portions first. Jian Chen crossed his legs and sat down. First, he carefully studied the 3 portions of vital energy. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with them, he immediately began to absorb their tremendous energy. Although the 3 portions of vital energy were nowhere near enough for his chaotic body to advance to the next layer, it did make his chaotic Niden swell up, increasing the chaotic force within it. As a result, the energy he needed for his future breakthrough had lessened slightly. Jian Chen had already reached the major achievement of the chaotic body, so he both absorbed and refined energy at an extremely fast speed. One of the portions of vital energy in his hand decreased at a visible rate. Not only did the vital energy contain a tremendous energy, but it also possessed a tiny portion of the 3 vital energies and some of their fleshly essence. As a result, Jian Chen benefited tremendously when he absorbed the 3 portions of vital energy. Not only could he feel his chaotic Niden rapidly swell up, but his 3 vital energies increased as well. A pleasant feeling immediately overwhelmed him, especially when the fleshly essence fused with his chaotic body. All his pores opened up uncontrollably as every single cell and every single atom in him devoured the scarce fleshly essence greedily like hungry tigers. The fleshly essence came from 3 extremely powerful beasts after all, so they were of an extremely high level. It was indeed exceedingly nourishing for Jian Chen's chaotic body. Jian Chen could clearly sense his chaotic body rapidly strengthen as he absorbed the fleshly essence, where the very quality of his body transformed by leaps and bounds. In just 1.5 months, Jian Chen completely absorbed the 3 portions of vital energy. Even though his chaotic body remained at the 13th layer, his body had become slightly tougher than before due to the fleshly essence. My chaotic body is probably no less tough than the 14th layer, Jian Chen rejoiced when he sensed the explosive power within his body. His chaotic body had first been reforged by a strand of true chaotic force when he fused the twin swords. Coupled with the fleshly essence he had just absorbed, his chaotic body had completely exceeded the toughness of the 13th layer. Coupled with the amplification from the laws of strength, my chaotic body will become slightly more powerful once again. I wonder which heavenly layer of infinite prime my current battle prowess is equivalent to, Jian Chen thought. However, he was certain that his current battle prowess was far greater than when he killed the infinite prime on planet Tianming. At this moment, with a flip of his hand, a tender, beautiful flower hovered in his palm. The flower seemed to be intelligent. As soon as it appeared, it swung its body towards Jian Chen like it was trying to curry up to him. It was close to him. This was the immortal devouring orchid that Jian Chen had obtained from the Neptunian divine palace. He had learnt from the sword spirits that the immortal devouring orchid was extremely renowned in the saints' world, and it specialized in devouring the bodies of immortals. Its growth rate was extremely astonishing. However, the immortal devouring flower was just too weak right now, while Jian Chen's opponents were either god kings or primordial realm experts. As a result, the immortal devouring flower could not eat their corpses, so its growth was rather gradual. However, even with that being the case, it had reached the origin realm after ingesting some of Jian Chen's chaotic blood. I'll bestow a droplet of my essence blood to you. Hopefully, you can become a deity soon. Once you become a deity, you should be able to absorb the blood of god kings slowly. There are 2 god king corpses in the divine hall waiting for you. Once you're powerful enough, there will even be the corpse of an infinite prime. Jian Chen dripped a droplet of essence blood onto the immortal devouring orchid. Due to the impressive comments from the sword spirits, Jian Chen held high expectations towards the immortal devouring orchid's future. He would spare no effort to nurture it. The immortal devouring orchid seemed to be able to understand Jian Chen. After receiving the droplet of essence blood, it furled up happily and began absorbing the energy. Although Jian Chen's blood was far more powerful than the blood of god kings, his blood was unable to harm the orchid at all because he had purposefully controlled it, and the orchid had already accepted him as its master. The orchid was able to absorb it smoothly. Jian Chen stowed the orchid away and went to find Kaiya in the cavern. He saw her seated on the ground as she stared into the depths in a daze. Jianchen, are you about to leave? Kaya looked over and asked Jianchen. Jianchen nodded and said, the competition between the candidates for the position of chosen saint is about to start. I must head back. Kaya looked at the depths of the cavern and said gently, the vital energy there hides a very terrifying energy. If you can obtain this energy, you will benefit tremendously. Jianchen immediately looked towards the pool of blood that nourished Gusta's body. He sighed gently, indeed, but approaching that place is very difficult. When he reached there, he thought of something. Let me try with the Anata Tower. Kaya, for the sake of your safety, enter the tower with me. Kaya nodded. She had no objections. Afterwards, the two of them entered the Anata Tower, and Jianchen piloted the tower to approach the pool of blood carefully. When he arrived within 100 kilometers of the pool of blood, it began to surge violently again as if a serpent was stirring up the entire place. Powerful vital energy erupted and shot over. Immediately, space trembled as the chains danced. It seemed like a terrifying storm was being charged up. It was extremely powerful and frightening. The vital energy was just too powerful. The further he advanced, the greater the impact he received. It was truly devastating, where even primordial realm experts dared not venture far in. However, no matter how ferocious it became, it could not stop the Anata Tower. Under Jianchen's control, the Anata Tower endured the incoming vital energy, tottering along the way as it rapidly advanced through the violent storm. Jianchen's eyes gradually began to shine as he watched the Anata Tower inch forwards. However, when the Anata Tower reached 3 kilometers away from the pool of blood, a powerful barrier suddenly rose up in the end. No matter what Jianchen did with the Anata Tower, he was unable to charge through the barrier. He had been blocked outside. It doesn't work. I can't approach it at all. Jianchen sighed gently and in pity from within the Anata Tower. He could sense that the barrier had been cast down by extremely terrifying experts, and it was probably the handiwork of the other two kings of the ancient great apes. Jianchen, I want to stay here a little longer, Kaya said from beside Jianchen. Jianchen glanced at Kaya with a strange expression, but he nodded in agreement right afterwards. He did not say anything else. After all, this was Kaya's freedom. He had no reason to say no. Moreover, this underground cavern was extremely well hidden. It would be extremely safe if Kaya remained here. Kaya, you have to be careful. Don't get within 100 kilometers of the pool of blood. Do you understand? Jianchen warned sternly before taking Kaya to somewhere safe and leaving all by himself. Chapter 2282, Blood Medallion. Somewhere on the desolate plain, there was an extremely remote swamp shrouded by poisonous mist. People rarely set foot in this place. Only a few venomous beasts prowled the surroundings, hunting for prey. At this moment, the calm swamp suddenly began to churn in an extremely irregular fashion as if something was about to burst out. The disturbance attracted the prowling beasts. They gathered over quickly as they stared at the place with their cold eyes. Very soon, the churning swamp suddenly burst open. A figure in white robes and shrouded in light silently emerged from the swamp. Unsurprisingly, the figure was Jianchen. The layer of light around Jianchen kept the mud away from him. He rose up from the swamp at a steady pace. The moment they saw Jianchen, the few beasts who were clearly lacking in terms of intelligence immediately produced a deep growl and lunged at him. Jianchen did not even glance at the beasts. With a wave of his hand, he shot out a few radiant swords and cut them to pieces. Afterwards, he found his bearings and immediately rose up into the air through the use of Radiant Saint Force. He directly headed towards the Radiant Saint Hall. Jianchen only displayed the speed that a Radiant Saint Master with a one-colored soul core could possess, so he did not travel quickly. When he left the swamp and approached a city, he was suddenly stopped by a fighter who seemed to be in his 30s. The fighter was a god and was extremely plump. However, he seemed like a simple and honest man. His appearance gave off a rather foolish vibe. "Stop. Please show your blood medallion," the man said with a soft, muffled voice. Jianchen frowned when he heard that. He had remained underground for about 2 years, so he had no clue at all regarding what had happened in the outside world. He had no idea what this blood medallion was at all. Before Jianchen said anything, another middle-aged man flew over from the distance. The middle-aged man was dressed exactly the same as the plump man, clearly originating from the same organization. The middle-aged man arrived beside the plump man and smacked the back of his head. He said, "You idiot! You might not recognize the attire of the Radiant Saint Hall, but you should recognize Radiant Saint Force at the very least. The blood medallions of disciples from the Radiant Saint Hall will obviously be checked by people with greater status. What are you taking part for?" Afterwards, the middle-aged man clasped his hand towards Jianchen amiably, paying no attention to Jianchen's one-colored soul core at all. He said, "Little brother, my junior is rather slow. I hope that you can forgive the offense he has caused just then." Jianchen smiled indifferently. After exchanging pleasantries with the middle-aged man, he asked, "Senior, may I ask what this blood medallion is about?" Seeing how friendly the disciple of the Radiant Saint Hall behaved, without putting on any of the haughtiness that belonged to a disciple of a peak sect, the middle-aged man immediately gained a great impression of Jianchen. However, Jianchen's question had surprised him. "You actually don't know about the blood medallion, little brother?" The middle-aged man stared at Jianchen strangely. "I have been cultivating in seclusion in the wilderness for 2 years. I haven't been paying attention to the matters of the world around me, so I have no idea what happened during that time," Jianchen said. "Is that the case?" The middle-aged man came to a realization before explaining with great patience. This blood medallion has actually only appeared recently as well. It's something that the peak experts of the Desolate Plain have been distributing with the many peak organizations. They've ordered all people on the Desolate Plain, regardless of cultivation, where even ordinary mortal who had never cultivated before are included, to have their blood tested with a wondrous treasure. Afterwards, all of them will receive a blood medallion. Only with the blood medallion will they be able to move about on the Desolate Plain freely. What if someone doesn't have a blood medallion? Jianchen asked with a frown. "They will obviously be captured and forcefully tested," said the middle-aged man. Afterwards, he smiled resplendently and said to Jianchen, "Of course, you're a disciple of a peak sect. Disciples of smaller sects like us would never dare to offend you. However, there are a few envoys from other peak sects who handle this matter especially. Look, this is a blood medallion. It's made from a special material. Every single blood medallion has an imprint of our life, so it cannot be forged." The middle-aged man was extremely polite to Jianchen. He told him everything he knew and even took the initiative to show his own blood medallion to Jianchen. Jianchen studied the blood medallion in the middle-aged man's hands and asked no more. He thanked him before leaving. "Protector Zhou, he's only a weak disciple. Why were you so polite to him?" the plump man asked in confusion after Jianchen had left. The middle-aged man referred to as Protector Zhou smacked the plump man's forehead with his knuckles again as he said in frustration, "You idiot. He's no ordinary disciple. His attire is something that only an internal disciple can wear. Only star geniuses possess something like that in the Radiant Saint Hall. Every single disciple like that has extremely great status. They're not people that we can offend. Do you understand?" However, Jianchen's face immediately sank after he left. He perfectly understood that this so-called blood medallion was something the peak experts had come up with just to find him. It had to be mentioned that the blood medallion had caused Jianchen quite the headache. Even though he could hide the energy within his blood from people like God Kings, he was unable to hide the actual level of his blood no matter what. This was because even when the blood of God Kings possessed no energy at all, it still differed drastically from the blood of cultivators at lower levels. Let alone through a certain type of treasure, a few experts with great cultivations could even see through it with a single glance. It could be said that once he had his blood tested, his disguise as a Radiant Saint Master would immediately fall apart. "I need to enter the Tower of Radiance as soon as possible. I can only get what I want from there. It won't matter even if my disguise falls apart by then," thought Jianchen. Time was getting tighter and tighter. He really did not have much of it left. Afterwards, Jianchen sped up. He used the teleportation formation in the nearby city and finally returned to the Radiant Saint Hall after several teleportations. During this time, he frequently saw many people check the blood medallions of every single person in each city. However, his identity as a disciple of the Radiant Saint Hall had saved him quite a lot of trouble. None of the people checking for blood medallions dared to stop him. The current Radiant Saint Hall had changed slightly compared to when Jian Chen had left. What stood out the most was that quite a large square had been erected near the Foreign Affairs Hall, where the words, "Blood Test," were written nearby. Many Radiant Saint Masters gathered on the square, having their blood tested in an orderly manner. There were many Radiant Saint Masters among them who held a thumb-sized blood medallion. They studied it curiously. However, compared to outside, the blood test in the Radiant Saint Hall was clearly much more casual. It was not as strict. Jian Chen looked at the square deeply before leaving with a sunken face. He returned to the soaring clouds peak. Chapter 2283. Replaced. When Jian Chen returned to the soaring clouds peak, the entire place was quiet. With his sharp senses, he discovered that both Zhuo Feng and Han Xen were not on the soaring clouds peak. He glanced into the distance and discovered that many Radiant Saint Masters of various cultivation levels were flying directly towards the sky-gazing peak from the other peaks. Jian Chen immediately stopped a Radiant Saint Master with a one-colored soul core and asked what was happening. The Radiant Saint Master Jian Chen stopped was a young woman. She immediately looked at Jian Chen with an extremely strange gaze after hearing Jian Chen's question. "Oh? You don't know? The Lord of the Soaring Clouds Peak and the Lord of the Snowfall Peak are fighting on the sky-gazing peak. I heard they're fighting for a position as one of the 9 retainers or something." A gleam of light flashed through Jian Chen's eyes. He clasped his fist at the young lady and no longer remained there for any longer. A pair of radiant wings appeared on his back as he hurried off to the sky-gazing peak as quickly as he could. Jian Chen unleashed his full speed along the way. He constantly overtook Radiant Saint Masters with 3-colored soul cores, causing many of them to look over. Who is he? He only seems to have a 1-colored soul core, but how is he able to move so astonishingly fast? He can actually use the radiant wings to such a level. Does he really have a 1-colored soul core? The person who just passed us seems to be Chang Yang of the Soaring Clouds Peak. What? He's Chang Yang? That person who's rumored to have perfected the usage of Radiant Saint Force? Cries rang out from the surroundings constantly, but Jian Chen ignored them all. He only traveled as quickly as he could, flying over mountain after mountain before finally arriving on the sky-gazing peak. The huge square on the sky-gazing peak had already become crowded. Many Radiant Saint Masters of varying strength gathered there while a huge ring hovered in the air in the center of the square. Jian Chen saw Han Xen and a skinny, middle-aged man battling in the ring with a single glance. The floating ring was a supreme quality saint artifact. Its surroundings were protected by a powerful barrier, enough to easily endure a battle between late god kings. At this moment, Han Xen and the Lord of the Snowfall Peaks battle had already reached a great intensity. The laws of the Hallowed filled their surroundings, clashing time and time again. It erupted with powerful ripples of energy. All of the energy ripples were stopped by the energy barrier around the ring such that their battle was unable to harm the surrounding Radiant Saint Masters. They fought extremely quickly. Weaker Radiant Saint Masters only saw a flurry, unable to see the two of them strike out at all. Jian Chen frowned when he saw the fight. With his level of cultivation, he could naturally see the entire battle. He could tell with a single glance that Han Xen was quite a lot weaker compared to the Lord of the Snowfall Peak. He had clearly lost the upper hand. His defeat was only a matter of time now. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak should be at the peak of early Radiant God King, Jian Chen thought. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak was only a step away from a cultivation realm equivalent to mid-God King, while Han Xen had only reached God King recently. As he had expected, Han Xen was struck in the chest by the laws of the Hallowed. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak condensed. Han Xen was blown away, striking the barrier around the ring heavily. He struggled to climb to his feet. Victory goes to the Lord of the Snowfall Peak, Zhou Yuan. the Lord of the Sky-Gazing Peak's voice rang out, announcing the results of the battle. Afterwards, the barrier opened up, and the white-clothed, skinny Lord of the Snowfall Peak left the ring with a flushed face under the enthusiastic cheers of all the disciples there. Han Exin, on the other hand, laid in the ring, bloodied. He was very injured. Sir! Sir! Zhuofeng and Bai Yu, who had been waiting below the ring, immediately flew up and looked at the injured Han Exin. Sorrow filled their faces. Jian Chen also arrived in the ring as quickly as he could. He remained silent as he directly used his radiant arts to heal Han Exin. Both Bai Yu and Zhuofeng were slightly surprised by Jian Chen's sudden appearance. Even Han Xian's gloomy gaze lit up slightly. But at this moment, they were clearly in no mood to catch up. Han Exin, why don't you take a good look at yourself first before you try to contend for the spot with me? You think too highly of yourself. At this moment, the Lord of the Snowfall Peak suddenly looked back and scoffed. Han Exin, you should feel fortunate that we're in the Radiant Saint Hall. Although I can't kill you even when we're outside, I'll definitely leave you half dead, the Lord of the Snowfall Peak said arrogantly. He did not seem to take Han Xian seriously at all. Afterwards, he looked at Jian Chen, and his gaze became especially cold. Although this was the first time he had seen Jian Chen, how was it possible for him to not know the person behind his second disciple's injuries? However, Jian Chen only had a one-colored soul core. He was no different from an ant in his eyes, so with his status, he would never lower himself to talk to Jian Chen. Just when the Lord of the Snowfall Peak was about to look away, Jian Chen just happened to gaze over. They made eye contact. However, the eye contact made the Peak Lord's heart suddenly lurch as he felt an ill omen. But afterwards, the Peak Lord laughed at himself. He thought, what's up with me? Have I been frightened by a low-level disciple with only a one-colored soul core? The Peak Lord did not pay too much attention to it. He left under the gazes of admiration from the many disciples. Han Xian had already been escorted back to the Soaring Clouds Peak by Jian Chen, Bai Yu, and Zhuofeng. At this moment, Han Exin sat in his small wooden hut at the top of the Soaring Clouds Peak as he healed with Radiant Saint Force. Junior sister, what is wrong? Why was teacher fighting with the Lord of the Snowfallen Peak? Jian Chen asked Bai Yu softly from outside the wooden hut. Bai Yu looked at the wooden hut and said with a heavy heart, it's all because of the position as one of the 9 retainers for a chosen saint candidate. Among the 5 candidates, Donglin Yanxue was still missing a retainer, so teacher and the Lord of the Snowfall Peak's fight was to decide who would take up the role as the final retainer for Donglin Yanxue. Jian Chen frowned when he heard that. He suddenly felt an ill omen. Strange. Isn't the chosen saint the only who can choose retainers? I heard that due to some things that happened in the last 2 competitions, all 5 candidates this time seem to have the right to choose 9 retainers. It has something to do with the first trial, said Bai Yu. In other words, Donglin Yanxue's 9 candidates have already been confirmed? Jian Chen asked. That's right. I heard from my master that aside from the Lord of the Snowfall Peak, the other 8 retainers for Donglin Yanxue all have mid-7-colored soul cores, said Bai Yu. The master she spoke about was clearly the elder who had taken her away from the Soaring Clouds Peak. Jian Chen's face did not change at all from that, but his heart had already sunken. Raging fury built up within him. Chapter 2284. All for nothing. In the past, he had given Donglin Yanxue a pure soul, which allowed her cultivation to increase drastically within 2 years. As a result, she became the chosen saint. The entire purpose behind his actions was to gain a position as one of the 9 retainers so that he could access the Tower of Radiance. However, in the end, as the day of the competition approached, he learnt from Bai Yu that Donglin Yanxue's 9 retainers had already been decided. Donglin Yanxue had broken her side of the promise, leaving Jian Chen utterly furious. He could not keep up his disguise on the desolate plain for long. He would be exposed once the blood tests came for him. Although the blood tests were not as strict in the Radiant Saint Hall compared to the outside world, he knew that all the disciples of the Radiant Saint Hall would eventually be forced to take the blood tests. As a result, he was truly running out of time. If he could not enter the Tower of Radiance as one of Donglin Yenshue's 9 retainers, he might lose the chance to enter the Tower of Radiance forever. Donglin Yanshue has been making extremely rapid progress among the 5 candidates. I heard teachers say that Donglin Yanshue went from an early 4-colored soul core to the peak of the 4-colored soul core in 2 or 3 years. She's only a step away from the 5-colored soul core. Although the 4 other candidates have been making great progress as well, none of them have reached the peak of the 4-colored soul core. As a result, Donglin Yanshue has gone from being the weakest to the strongest out of the 5 candidates. Moreover, I heard from Master that her grasp and control over Radiant Saint Force has skyrocketed over the past 2 years. She has become even more skilled. There's at least a 70% chance that she'll become the chosen saint. Bai Yu looked at Jian Chen and said with hidden meaning. She knew about Donglin Yanshue spending half a month in Jian Chen's dwelling. Jian Chen listened to Bai Yu talk about Donglin Yanshue's transformation over the past 2 years. Finally, he could not hold himself back anymore. He reminded Bai Yu to look after Han Exin before immediately leaving the soaring cloud's peak. He condensed a pair of radiant wings and shot towards the myriad flowers peak with lightning speed. There was less than a week until the competition between the candidates began. As a result, Jian Chen was able to hear all the Radiant Saint Masters discuss the matter everywhere thanks to his superior senses. Donglin Yanshue's rapid cultivation advancement was no secret. The news had already spread far and wide, so Jian Chen heard many discussions about her. All sorts of versions to this story appeared. However, a small portion of people believed that Donglin Yanshue's improvement over the past 2 years was directly related to Chang Yang of the Soaring Clouds Peak. No way! Chang Yang only has a 1-colored soul core, and it's said that he's a 1-star genius. How can he assist a 9-star genius with a 4-colored soul core like Donglin Yanshue? Naturally, more people snorted in response. These discussions either came from small groups of Radiant Saint Masters conversing quietly as they traveled through the air or from the nearby mountains. Jian Chen missed none of it with his superior senses. Jian Chen remained silently along the way. With his speed at the 1-colored soul core, he finally arrived on the Myriad Flowers Peak a few hours later. Right after Jian Chen set foot on the mountain, he spread out his senses and enveloped the entire place. The Lord of the Myriad Flowers Peak was also an expert equivalent to a mid-god king. Hence, Jian Chen did not dare to use the senses of his soul, just in case the Peak Lord could sense it. However, it was impossible for her to discover his normal senses. However, Jian Chen's face sank very soon. Donglin Yanshue was not on the Myriad Flowers Peak. Isn't that Chang Yang of the Soaring Clouds Peak? It really is him. I heard that Senior Donglin Yanshue journeyed quite the distance to go to the Soaring Clouds Peak to look for him. She even stayed in his dwelling for half a month. So he's Chang Yang. His appearance isn't impressive at all. His cultivation is nothing special, and it's said that he has no background. I really don't know why this person caught Senior Yanshue's eyes. Sure, don't blabber. How can he catch Senior Yanshue's eyes? It's said that Senior Yanshue only went to find him last time to exchange their experiences on cultivation. The majority of the disciples on the Myriad Flowers Peak were female. Presently, there were a few male disciples from other peaks among them. Immediately, many of the women discovered Jian Chen's arrival. They all cast curious gazes over as they discussed softly in the distance. Jian Chen did not stick around. He turned around and left the Myriad Flowers Peak, returning to the Soaring Clouds Peak. Since Donglin Yanshue was not on the Myriad Flowers Peak, she would definitely be in the Sacred Hall. However, Jian Chen could set foot in there with his current status. Several hours later, Jian Chen returned to the Soaring Clouds Peak. He did not go to the mountain peak. Instead, he sat on a black rock outside his dwelling quietly. He stared at the misty mountains in a daze. Do I really have to expose the fact that I've comprehended the laws of the hallowed already? At this moment, Jian Chen felt conflicted. With Donglin Yanshue going back on her word, he was now stuck between a rock and a hard place. He had no idea how to proceed. Was he supposed to give up on the chance to enter the Tower of Radiance and travel away from this place, away from the desolate plain? Alternatively, did he have to expose the secret of him comprehending the laws of the hallowed with a one-colored soul core, becoming the only genius with such an achievement in the past 1,000,000 years? He would immediately become the chosen saint if he chose the latter. He was reluctant to leave. However, if he revealed his talent, he would immediately become the center of attention. This would increase the chance of him getting exposed. After all, once he became the chosen saint, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall would definitely thoroughly investigate his past or even directly peer into his past and future. Just as Jian Chen faced this dilemma, a figure surrounded by light arrived on the soaring cloud's peak. Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed when this person arrived. He was surprised. Even though the person was shrouded by light that obscured her appearance, Jian Chen could tell from a single glance that she was Donglin Yanxue. "We'll talk in your dwelling," Donglin Yanxue said to Jian Chen secretly before directly flying into his dwelling. A gleam of light flickered through Jian Chen's eyes. He returned to his simple dwelling silently and immediately cast a formation at the entrance. When Donglin Yanxue saw Jian Chen cast such an unimpressive formation, she frowned slightly. With a wave of her hand, she tossed out a formation disc and set up an even more powerful formation. Afterwards, she dispersed the light and revealed her face. "I get noticed wherever I go now, so I had no choice but to do this," Donglin Yanxue said to Jian Chen helplessly. Jian Chen remained indifferent. He stared at Donglin Yanshue's pretty face closely and said coldly, "You didn't keep your word." Donglin Yanxue became apologetic and replied, "I know, but this matter has already left my control. I no longer have the power to choose the 9 retainers. I'm extremely sorry about this." Donglin Yanxue was ashamed. Chapter 2285. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak's Death. "I have to enter the Tower of Radiance no matter what." Jian Chen secretly made up his mind. The Snowfall Peak was not far from the soaring cloud's peak. They were only separated by 3 mountains. On this day, 3 middle-aged men dressed in radiant Saint Master attire arrived beyond the Snowfall Peak. They smiled as they hovered there. One of them said, "Zhou Yuan, your old friends have come to visit. Are you busy?" The 3 middle-aged men were all lords of peaks in the Radiant Saint Hall. They all had 7 colored soul cores. In the past, they did not need to announce their arrival when they came to visit the Lord of the Snowfall Peak. They would directly set foot on the mountain. But now, Zhou Yuan had become one of Donglin Yanshue's 9 retainers. It was extremely likely for him to enter the Tower of Radiance. His status differed greatly from before, so the 3 of them were unable to visit him as liberally as they used to. The 3 peak lords waited there. However, before Zhou Yuan could answer them, the first disciple of the Snowfall Peak, Zhou Mu, had come to receive them. Zhou Mu was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He had a calm and cool personality and possessed quite a bit of talent. He had only been cultivating for around 2,000 years, yet he already possessed a 4-colored soul core. He had comprehended the laws of the hallowed when he had a 3-colored soul core. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak took the most pride in this disciple. Zhou Mu greets the 3 peak lords. "The 3 peak lords have come at a bad time. My teacher is not on the Snowfall Peak right now." Zhou Mu clasped his fist politely. "What? Zhou Yuan is not on the Snowfall Peak? Where did he go then?" The 3 peak lords were surprised. Zhou Mu hesitated before replying, "In a few days, the competition between the chosen saints will begin. Teacher is preparing for that right now, so he has already left the Radiant Saint Hall to buy some saint artifacts that will increase his strength. If that's the case, we won't trouble you anymore. Let's go." The 3 peak lords became disappointed. They did not set foot on the Snowfall Peak, turning around and leaving instead. A figure silently emerged from the dense mist after the 3 of them left. He seemed to be in his 20s, and his appearance was nothing special. He did not stand out at all. He was Jian Chen, who had disguised himself as Chang Yang. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak has actually left the Radiant Saint Hall. Jian Chen stared at the Snowfall Peak from afar. He did not use the senses of his soul, only his regular, superior senses to listen in on the entire conversation between Zhou Mu and the 3 peak lords. "Perfect," a gleam of vicious light flickered through Jian Chen's eyes. He hid in the clouds again and vanished as if he was never there in the first place. No one discovered his presence. Afterwards, Jian Qin concealed his presence. He did not register his leave in the Foreign Affairs Hall. Instead, he avoided everyone and left the Radiant Saint Hall like a ghost. With his current cultivation, even the God Kings stationed in the Foreign Affairs Hall would not be able to discover him at all if he really wanted to remain hidden. As a result, no one knew about his departure. Jian Qin continued to cover up his tracks after leaving the Radiant Saint Hall. With a flash, he disappeared into a bush several 100,000 kilometers away from the Radiant Saint Hall. A while later, he reemerged. This time, he was dressed in black robes, and his appearance had undergone an overwhelming change. He disguised himself as an especially burly man who stood over 2 meters tall. He had quite the vicious face. It was impossible for anyone to connect his current stature with the Radiant Saint Masters that had delicate bodies. Although the Lord of the Snowfall Peak ventured out, no one knows where he is with how vast the desolate plain is. As a result, I can only wait for him in a place he must pass to return to the Radiant Saint Hall. Jian Qin stared into the distance as his gaze became piercing. They shone with astonishing killing intent. I can't let the Lord of the Snowfall Peak return to the Radiant Saint Hall alive this time, thought Jian Qin. Then he pushed off the ground with his feet as the laws of strength revolved around him. Like a loose arrow, he turned into a black streak of light and shot off into the distance with lightning speed. He instantly vanished into the horizon. In the end, Jian Qin stopped when he was far enough from the Radiant Saint Hall. Afterwards, he found a place to hide and carefully concealed his presence. He waited for his prey silently. Zhou Yuan had to pass this place to return to the Radiant Saint Hall. Regardless of where he went, he would definitely come here once he wanted to return to the Radiant Saint Hall. Jian Qin's wait lasted for 3 days. 3 days later, Peak Lord Zhou Yuan dressed in his white robes appeared in a teleportation formation within a bustling city that was closest to the Radiant Saint Hall. He walked out excitedly, and without any hesitation he immediately took to the air and headed back to the Radiant Saint Hall. This trip was worth it. It was completely worth it. I didn't come out for nothing. Although I've basically used up all my savings, I've managed to buy this. It's all worth it. With this, my battle prowess will be no weaker than those Radiant Saint Masters with mid-7-colored soul cores. Although my cultivation is the lowest among the 9 of us, my battle prowess is probably enough for me to rank in the top 3 as long as I use this. The Peak Lord was overjoyed. He had indeed benefited greatly from this trip. It was enough for him to stand out, make a name for himself, and become renowned during the competition between the candidates that everyone paid attention to. To him, this was a great honor. Moreover, this honor would only be the start to his wonderful future. The Peak Lord left the city very soon. He flew in the sky using Radiant Saint Force. There were no teleportation formations he could use for the remainder of the journey, so he could only fly slowly. However, when the Peak Lord flew over a barren mountain range, a black figure suddenly shot up and directly blocked his path. "Sir, who are you? Why do you block my path?" The Peak Lord came to a halt as he frowned impatiently. He was in a hurry to return to the Radiant Saint Hall right now to make his final preparations for the competition between the candidates. He was unwilling to waste any time when every second mattered. "Zhou Yuan, you've forgotten about me so soon?" The person who blocked Zhou Yuan was Jian Qin, who had disguised himself as a burly man. He stared at Zhou Yuan and sneered. At the same time, his gaze became piercing. The Peak Lord was filled with doubt because he was certain that he did not know this black-robed man. However, when he felt the man's piercing gaze, his heart actually lurched. His heart began to beat faster as he became rather afraid of making eye contact with this person. That gaze seems to be rather familiar, thought the Peak Lord. Very soon, he shuddered violently and immediately stared at the man in disbelief. He felt emotional turmoil as he cried out, "Fire!" At that moment, he finally recalled the owner of this familiar gaze. It was the gaze that Chang Yang revealed when the Peak Lord defeated the Lord of the Soaring Clouds Peak, Han Exen. Chang Yang clearly only had a 1-colored soul core, but he had now completely transformed into a fighter who gave off the presence of a god king surrounded by the laws of strength. Immediately, the Peak Lord was covered in cold sweat. He was dumbfounded. He clearly understood what it meant to be both a fighter and radiant Saint Master. However, before the Peak Lord had time to think more about it, Jian Chen had already struck out decisively. His hand directly moved towards Zhou Yuan's head. Not only did the palm strike contain the strength of his 13th layer chaotic body, but it was also amplified by the laws of strength. As a result, despite not using the laws of the sword, his attack resembled a strike from the primordial realm. The air rumbled as he struck out, space shook. The Peak Lord's expression changed drastically. He could not dodge or react in time. He could only watch Jian Chen's hand approach him. Bang! Jian Chen's hand landed on the Peak Lord's head without any suspense. Not only did the Peak Lord's head directly explode from the terrifying power of the chaotic body amplified by the laws of strength, but the force of the attack even reduced his body to mincemeat. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak, Zhou Yuan, had died from the first strike. Chapter 2286, Vice Leader Xianzhan, 1. After killing the Lord of the Snowfall Peak, Jian Chen did not stick around. He turned around and left. He did not touch any of Zhou Yuan's belongings, as he was afraid of leaving behind clues that could be traced back to him. Afterwards, Jian Chen disguised himself as Radiant Saint Master Chang Yang again in an obscure location. He made his way around the Foreign Affairs Hall and returned to the Soaring Clouds Peak with an extremely low profile. The Radiant Saint Hall learnt of Zhou Yuan's death very soon. Right when Jian Chen returned to the Soaring Clouds Peak, 3 elders and several violet-robed guards left the Radiant Saint Hall that stood above the clouds in an aggressive manner. They reached the location where the Lord of the Snowfall Peak had died very soon. The faces of the 3 elders sank the moment they saw the crushed corpse. Their faces became extremely ugly. Zhou Yuan had died in a place where he had to pass through to return to the Radiant Saint Hall. This was placed close to the Radiant Saint Hall, yet someone was bold enough to kill a Peak Lord here. This matter was basically a slap of naked provocation to the Radiant Saint Hall in the eyes of the 3 elders. Look around. We have to get to the bottom of this. We can't spare Zhou Yuan's murderer. How dare he kill a lord of a peak? This person isn't taking us seriously at all. Immediately ask guest elder Mu Tian to come over. Get him to turn back time here. We need to know everything that happened. The 3 elders were furious. They did not care about Zhou Yuan's life. They only cared about the dignity of the Radiant Saint Hall. He was a Peak Lord, yet he had been mercilessly slain along the path back to the Radiant Saint Hall. If they did not look into this matter properly and failed to capture the murderer, it would damage the name of the Radiant Saint Hall. Very soon, a gray-robed old man was brought over under the lead of several violet-robed guards. He was Mu Tian. He was not a Radiant Saint Master but a fighter. He was an infinite prime that held a guest position in the Radiant Saint Hall, enjoying a status similar to the elders of the Radiant Saint Hall. Mu Tian immediately used a secret technique to turn back time to reveal the events that had occurred. Very soon, the Peak Lord's death at Jian Chen's hands was displayed clearly. However, the eyes of the elders and Mu Tian narrowed slightly when they saw the Peak Lord perish from a single palm strike. This person is very powerful. He probably has a foot planted in the primordial realm. It's quite tough for me to turn back time, Mu Tian said emotionlessly. Looks like the black-robed man had grievances with Zhou Yuan. The Peak Lord's death is related to revenge. It doesn't matter why Zhou Yuan died. He's still a Peak Lord from our Radiant Saint Hall. We must get to the bottom of his death, record his appearance and immediately set up a bounty for him. The 3 elders ordered the setting of a bounty without any hesitation. Very soon, the bounty was set up, and the search for Zhou Yuan's murderer began throughout the entire desolate plain. At the same time, their investigation into the black-robed man began. The Radiant Saint Hall was a peak organization of the desolate plain after all. The more powerful an organization was, the more they cared about their image. The death of a Peak Lord along the path back to the Radiant Saint Hall had basically crossed their bottom line. The radiant Saint Hall would never drop the matter. Meanwhile, the white-robed Donglin Yanxue was sitting on a bed within the radiant Saint Hall as she rested with her eyes closed. There were only 3 days until the competition between the candidates. She needed to adjust herself to her peak conditions so that she could contend for the position she had longed for with all her might. At this moment, the door was opened, and a graceful woman walked in. Despite looking middle-aged, she was still charming. Her skin was white and filled with a mature sense of beauty. "Greetings to Master." Donglin Yanxue immediately got off her bed and bowed politely when she saw the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman was Donglin Yanxue's master in the Radiant Saint Hall. She was also one of the elders. Her name was Mu Shui. Mu Shui nodded. She looked at Donglin Yanxue gently and said, "Yanxue, I've come to tell you something. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak, Zhou Yuan, one of your 9 retainers, has died outside. You now have a missing retainer spot, and someone new will be chosen soon." "The Lord of the Snowfall Peak is dead?" A strange light flickered through Donglin Yanxue's beautiful eyes immediately. "That's right. He's dead, and he died on his way back to the Radiant Saint Hall. The person who killed him sure is bold, daring to take action right outside the Radiant Saint Hall," said Mu Shui. "Master, do you know who the murderer is? The Peak Lord is one of my retainers after all. I can't distance myself from his murder at a time like this," Donglin Yanxue said. "We have the appearance of the murderer. It's in this crystal. However, you're far too weak right now, so you can't avenge Zhou Yuan. That's because the murderer is very powerful. I think only the elders of the Radiant Saint Hall can deal with him. Adjust your condition properly in the next 2 days. I'll choose your new retainer for you." Mu Shui left behind a crystal and was about to leave. "Master, can I choose this retainer instead?" Donglin Yanxue immediately asked. Mu Shui stopped. She looked back at Donglin Yanxue and sighed gently. "Are you thinking about giving the position to that disciple from the Soaring Clouds Peak? It's a pity that he's too weak." "Master, I owe Changyang a huge favor. Just help me out this time and let me return the favor. Otherwise, I'll always be in guilt. It'll affect my future cultivation," Donglin Yanxue pleaded painstakingly. Mu Shui sighed gently. She said with some helplessness, "All right then, I'll listen to you. I'll do my best to persuade the other elders. In the end, it's not my decision to make." Jianchen sat in his dwelling on the Soaring Clouds Peak. The light in his eyes flickered as he sank into his thoughts. Although the Peak Lord's death has opened up a spot among the 9 retainers, Donglin Yanxue has said that she isn't completely confident about this matter. As a result, I can't place all my hopes on Donglin Yanxue. "Looks like it's time for me to find Xian Ming," thought Jianchen. After making up his mind, he sent a sliver of the senses of his soul into the Anata Tower immediately. Chapter 2287, Vice Leader Xian Zhan. 2. Xian Ming was sitting on the floor of the 2nd floor in the Anata Tower. Currently, he was devoting himself to cultivation. Dense, sacred radiant saint force enveloped him as the laws of the hallowed revolved about his surroundings. He was trying his best to condense a soul tree. This was because an extremely powerful demon threatened the lives of hallowed saint masters who reached peak radiant God King. As a result, Xian Ming did not dare to leave this place unless he broke through. He did not dare to go outside and would prefer permanent restriction. As a result, only by breaking through and condensing a soul tree, reaching something akin to the primordial realm for fighters, would he recover his freedom. Xian Ming. At this moment, Jianchen condensed an illusionary figure using the sliver of his soul and appeared before Xian Ming silently. At this moment, he was forced to disturb Xian Ming's cultivation. He roused Xian Ming with a gentle call. "Brother Jianchen. A long time no see. Alright, how's the situation outside right now? Have you avoided the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance's pursuit? Have you made it onto the desolate plain?" Xian Ming stopped cultivating and asked several questions immediately. In particular, his eyes lit up with undisguised eagerness when he mentioned the desolate plain. "I'm already on the desolate plain," said Jianchen. Xian Ming's face immediately lit up when he heard that. he said in excitement. Really? You're already on the desolate plain? Fantastic, this is just fantastic. Alright. Brother Jianchen, where are you on the desolate plain right now? Can you? Xian Ming paused and began to hesitate. Jianchen smiled and said, Xian Ming, if there's anything you want to say, just say it. After hesitating for a while, Xian Ming gritted his teeth and clasped his fist at Jianchen before saying, Brother Jianchen, can you pay a visit to the Radiant Saint Hall and tell my father I'm still alive and safe right now? After all, it has already been far too long since I left the desolate plain. I've cut off all contact with my father to avoid being discovered by the great demon for all these years. My father has no idea that I'm well right now. Naturally. However, your father is one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. He stands supreme. It's not that easy for me to see him, Jianchen agreed without any hesitation. Xian Ming's request happened to align with his needs. That's easy. Xian Ming bit his finger to draw blood and placed a droplet of it in a jade bottle before passing it to Jianchen. He said, Hallowed Saint Masters at my father's level are extremely sensitive to their bloodline. Jianchen, take this jade bottle and open it near the Radiant Saint Hall. As long as my father is in the Radiant Saint Hall, he'll sense it. Jianchen stowed the bottle away. After some thought, he said, Just this isn't enough. If your father misunderstands me and thinks that I obtained this droplet of blood through other means, I'll be in trouble. Then let me write a letter and tell my father that you, Jianchen, are my best friend. Xian Ming immediately took out a jade slip from his space ring and began to engrave a message in there with the senses of his soul. Hold on. I'm using a different name on the desolate plain right now. Don't use the name Jianchen. Use Changyang instead. Also, don't mention any details about me to your father. You can't disclose the existence of this tower either. You must have sensed it. This tower can hide you from the heavenly secrets, so it is an item of great quality. If your father learns about it, who knows if he'll start targeting me, Jianchen warned sternly. He could not afford to be careless when handling this. Xian Ming thought Jianchen was still being hunted down by the Azure Prince King, so he guaranteed, Brother Jianchen, you do not need to worry at all. The Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance will not dare to take a single step onto the desolate plain. However, Xian Ming still followed Jianchen's request. After he finished writing, he passed the jade slip to Jianchen for him to check the contents. After all, he was hiding with Jianchen's assistance. He had to listen to Jianchen for everything. If he angered Jianchen, he might decide to not go to the Radiant Saint Hall to meet his father. Jianchen carefully checked the contents of the jade slip. After confirming several times that there was nothing wrong, he left the 2nd floor with the jade bottle and the jade slip. He arrived on the 9th floor. Jianchen moved the droplet of blood to a jade bottle of higher quality on the 9th floor. No matter how long this blood stays in this bottle, it will be like it was just drawn. As a result, Xian Ming's father won't be able to tell when this blood was drawn and stored in the bottle, thought Jianchen. After arranging everything and ensuring that there were no problems, the sliver of his soul finally left the Enata Tower. Jianchen sat in his dwelling as he looked at the jade bottle. He hesitated slightly before opening the bottle cap. At the same time, 2 middle-aged men sat before each other within a well-decorated room of the Radiant Saint Hall. Shenzhan, who do you think will become chosen saint this time? One of the middle-aged men enjoyed the good alcohol leisurely as he asked in a casual tone. He was rather skinny, but his resolute face possessed a dignified presence of supremacy, much like a king. He just seemed to be naturally awe-inspiring. He was one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall, Mohe. The middle-aged man referred to as Shenzhan seemed especially burly. Just his body alone seemed to possess terrifying amounts of power. His chiseled face seemed cold, and it was enough to cause people to shiver. His gaze was piercing as well. It was difficult to maintain eye contact with him. There was always worry, sometimes more, sometimes less, on his face. It was like something weighed on his heart permanently. Shenzhan was also one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. He held great authority in the Radiant Saint Hall, making him an existence second to only the leader himself. I have no interest in that. It will be up to their luck as for who emerges victorious, Xianzhan said indifferently. Worry always lingered on his face. Mo, he looked at Xianzhan and sighed gently. You're worrying about your treasured son again? Xianzhan said nothing. He looked at the sky outside blankly with his piercing eyes. Mo, he sighed inside when he saw this. He had no idea how to comfort Xianzhan. After all, Xianming was Xianzhan's only child. Xianzhan had always treasured and spoilt Xianming, raising him with everything that he had. If Xianming had really died, Mo, he had no idea how great of an impact it would have on Xianzhan. However, at this moment, Xianzhan suddenly shuddered. His eyes immediately shone brightly as he leapt out of his seat. He became fixated on a certain direction as he could not help but show excitement. In the next moment he took a step and vanished. As if he had teleported, he left the sacred hall and appeared in the mountains below. What is Xianzhan doing? Mo, he was surprised by Xianzhan's actions. However, he did not follow along. Instead, he sat there to enjoy his rare liquor as he secretly paid attention to everything in the Radiant Saint Hall. Chapter 2288. Visiting the sacred hall. Jianchen sat in his dwelling as he looked at the open bottle in his hands. He waited quietly. He knew that Xianming's father would be able to sense the blood of his child. However, this could only happen within a certain range. If he were too far away, even an expert like Xianming's father would lose the ability to do so. I hope Xianming's father is in the Radiant Saint Hall, Jianchen secretly pleaded. He truly required help from Xianming's father if he wanted to enter the Tower of Radiance successfully at a time like this. Every retainer of the 5 candidates had people supporting them from behind. If Jianchen did not find a backer, it would be impossible for him to get selected over the others. As a result, Jianchen had no choice but to gain the support of Xianzhan's father. At this moment, Jianchen suddenly sensed something. Right afterwards, he only saw a blur, and a white-robed, burly, chisel-faced, middle-aged man appeared before him silently. The middle-aged man had silently appeared like a ghost. The simple formations outside Jianchen's dwelling were completely useless before him. The middle-aged man was one of the 8 vice leaders, Xianzhan. As soon as Xianzhan arrived, his piercing eyes locked onto the jade bottle in Jianchen's hand. His cold, hardened face could not help but reveal a look of excitement. Where did you get this droplet of blood from? Xianzhan asked. He stared at Jianchen with a sword-like gaze. Immediately, Jianchen felt a piercing pain everywhere. Xianzhan's gaze was just too sharp. It actually caused Jianchen pain. Jianchen immediately became polite. He bowed towards Xianzhan and said, "Senior must be Xianming's father, right?" A gleam of light flashed through Xianzhan's eyes when he heard that. He called out, "You actually know about Ming? Tell me, where is Ming'er? Please do not become flustered, Senior. I have something that Xianming has asked for me to bring to Senior," said Jianchen before taking out the jade slip from Xianming. Undisguised joy covered Xianzhan's face when he heard that Xianming had left something for him. He snatched the jade slip from Jianchen's hands impatiently and immediately checked the contents. Ming'er is still alive. He's still alive. Xianzhan viewed everything inside in a single moment. A smile that he had not shown for many years appeared on his cool face. He seemed to lighten up quite a lot then and there. Indeed, a heavy burden had finally been lifted from Xianzhan's heart after he learned that Xianming was still alive. He truly stopped worrying. Where is Ming'er right now? And when did you meet him? Xianzhan's gaze towards Jianchen immediately became amiable. This was because Xianming had clearly stated that Changyang was his friend and had helped him in the past. Xianzhan would obviously treat the person who had assisted his son and brought news of his son with a friendlier attitude. Xianming is in a very safe place. There is no need for him to worry about being discovered by the great demon he speaks of at all there. It's inconvenient for me to tell you where it is. However, I did meet Xianming roughly a few years ago, replied Jianchen. Xianming immediately became cautious and said, "I have been careless. If that is the case, you can't reveal Xianming's location at all. That person is just too powerful. His comprehension of laws has greatly exceeded the leaders. All the people at such a level possess exceptional abilities. Once you tell me, he'll probably be able to find out where Ming'er is hiding. Xian Zhan paused after that. He looked at Jian Chen with brimming interest and said, "You're called Chang Yang, right? Since you have ties with my son, and you've helped him before, I'll return this favor for Ming'er as his father. Chang Yang, would you like to become my disciple? Once you become my disciple, I will nurture you with everything I have to offer until you reach mid-seven-colored soul core." Xian Zhan immediately expressed his intention of accepting Jian Chen as a disciple. If this news made its way outside, it would be enough to throw the entire Radiant Saint Hall into an uproar. In the Radiant Saint Hall, even the 5 candidates only received guidance from the elders. None of them had the right to have a vice leader as their master. Even if it were an ordinary disciple with lackluster cultivation, becoming a disciple of a vice leader would immediately lead to their status skyrocketing. Their position would completely exceed the 5 candidates and would lead to a future of unlimited potential. Even the chosen saint was not as great as a disciple of a vice leader. Chosen saints would be selected once every millennium and would only receive 1,000 years of support after becoming the chosen saint. Meanwhile, the disciples of vice leaders did not have a time limit. Throughout the history of the Radiant Saint Hall, even chosen saints would not have the right to have a vice leader as their master. They would only receive the guidance from the vice leaders or leader from time to time. After the millennium was over, they would go back to what they were before. In other words, the opportunity presented before Jian Chen was something that all hallowed saint masters would lose their minds over. Even the 5 candidates could only dream of an opportunity like this. However, Jian Chen did not waver at all. He said apologetically, "Thank you for your kind intentions, senior, but I already have a teacher. I don't want to take on another master." Xian Zhan was surprised. He could not help but study Jian Chen properly. He said, "Do you know what it means to become my disciple? I have never taken a disciple in the past." "You'll become my only disciple if you take me as your master, so your status in comparison to the disciples of the 7 other vice leaders will only be greater." "I understand. As the saying goes, the master teaches but achievements still depend on the disciple's efforts. I have already become a disciple of my teacher, and my cultivation will solely depend on me in the future. Currently, my greatest wish is to enter the Tower of Radiance. I heard that is like the very origin of hallowed saint masters," said Jian Chen. Xian Zhan glanced at Jian Chen deeply and said, "Since you've already made up your mind, I won't force you to do anything. This is my medallion. If you face any problems in the future, come find me in the Sacred Hall." Xian Zhan vanished silently after leaving behind the medallion, having left the soaring cloud's peak. Jian Chen smiled as he looked at the white medallion floating before him. He knew that he would have the right to enter the Tower of Radiance now. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. The competition for chosen saint formally began on this day. The various peak lords left their mountains and gathered in the sacred hall above the clouds in the morning. The competition for chosen saint would be held in the sacred hall. Only peak lords and a select few hallowed saint masters with impressive backgrounds had the right to enter. Jian Chen stood outside his dwelling and gazed into the distance. With his eyes, he could easily see through the clouds and see what was happening 1,000,000 kilometers away. He clearly saw the various peak lords make their way over to the sacred hall at a steady pace while being surrounded by radiant saint force. Afterwards, light also permeated Jian Chen's surroundings. He condensed a pair of radiant wings and flew towards the sacred hall. "Stop! Or you! How can you trespass the sacred hall?" Before Jian Chen had even approached the sacred hall, he was stopped by a group of violet-robed guard a certain distance away. The guards glared at Jian Chen. Jian Chen said nothing. With a flip of his hand, he took out Xian Zhan's medallion. A vice leader's medallion. The expressions of the guards changed, and they cried out when they saw the medallion in Jian Chen's hands. Their gazes towards Jian Chen changed drastically as well. "May I ask if I have the right to enter the sacred hall now?" Jian Chen asked leisurely as he held the medallion. Of course. "This way please, this way." The group of guards immediately became polite and said in a hurry, Chapter 2289. Contending for the spot, Jianchen stowed the medallion away and continued forwards, finally stepping into the sacred hall that stood above the clouds. When he arrived here, many hallowed Saint Masters had already gathered in the huge square. Most of these hallowed Saint Masters were radiant God Kings and Lords of Peaks. Only a select few did not possess a seven-colored soul core and had entered due to their special statuses like Jianchen. Even though it was already crowded, it was surprisingly quiet. No one caused a ruckus. Not even soft discussions were occurring. All the hallowed Saint Masters revered the sacred hall. Senior brother? Why are you here as well? Strange, how did you get here? Baiyu had arrived beside Jianchen. Her pretty eyes were wide as she asked secretly in surprise. Baiyu had an elder as a master. Her status was special, so she naturally had the right to set foot in the sacred hall. I obviously have my methods. Jianchen smiled mysteriously and secretly replied. You're still acting mysterious. Senior brother, tell me quick. How did you get here? Didn't the guards outside stop you? Baiyu became more and more curious as she questioned Jianchen vigorously. It's time. I hereby announce that the competition for Chosen Saint has formally begun. An old elder stood on a huge stage in the center of the square as he proclaimed as such in a loud voice. That is Elder Mu Zhong. I heard from my master that Elder Mu Zhong has the greatest seniority out of all the elders. He has the greatest prestige among them, making him only second to the 8 vice leaders. At this moment, Baiyu stopped her interrogation and explained things to Jianchen. At this moment, Elder Mu Zhong continued. In the past competitions for Chosen Saint, the Chosen Saint only chooses 9 retainers after obtaining the position. However, following the discussion of the esteemed leader and the 8 vice leaders, we've made some changes to the competition this time. The 5 candidates will all choose 9 protectors as temporary retainers. Once the Chosen Saint has been selected, they will keep their 9 retainers, while the other 4 candidates will lose their right to be followed by their 9 protectors. But right now, one of the candidates, Donglin Yanxue, is missing a protector. As a result, the missing spot will be filled by a hallowed Saint Master present. The elders will now recommend people for this position. The Lord of the Snowfall Peak had died far too close to the beginning of the competition. They were unable to decide on a protector so quickly. As a result, they could only decide on it right now. The huge square immediately fell silent after Elder Mu Zhong said that. All the radiant God Kings present shut up. Only desire and eagerness burned in many of their eyes. Evidently, they all wanted this spot. The Tower of Radiance was a holy ground in the hearts of all radiant Saint Masters. It was a huge temptation towards the radiant God Kings and even the elders. However, the Tower of Radiance would only be opened between long periods of time, and even when it did open, they would not necessarily have the right to enter. As a result, becoming the retainer of the Chosen Saint was a shortcut to entering the Tower of Radiance. Naturally, they wanted the spot very much, desiring it for themselves. The eyes of the elders beside Elder Mu Zhong began to flicker with light after hearing his words. I recommend Chengqing, the Lord of the Broken Blade Peak, to become Donglin Yanxue's 9th protector. At this moment, an elder finally stated a name. I would recommend Lu Chang, Lord of the Black Sun Peak, to fill the last spot. Why not let Yun Wantian of the Verdant Peak become the 9th protector? A few elders stated names. The people they recommended were all Lords of Peaks, and most of them possessed mid-7-colored soul cores. Afterwards, many of the elders began to argue over who should take up the last spot. They fought intensely. Donglin Yanxue's master, Mu Shui, became rather troubled when she heard them mention these names. Everyone they brought up were radiant God Kings. At a time like this, she would become a joke if she followed her disciple's request and recommended a disciple with weak cultivation. After hesitating slightly, Mu Shui said, "Everyone, why don't we let Donglin Yanxue decide for the last spot?" The prestigious Elder Mu Zhong could not bear to watch the bickering between the elders any longer either. He immediately agreed to Mu Shui. Yes, let's hear Donglin Yanxue's recommendation. It's a pity that teacher Han Xian is still injured, or the last spot would definitely go to teacher, Baiyu secretly said to Jianchen. She sighed gently as she listened to the bickering between the elders. Senior brother, who do you think will get the last spot? Bai Yu continued with her questions. Jian Chen smiled mysteriously and said, Isn't it obvious? Of course it'll be your senior brother. Pisage, how is that possible? If you were a radiant god king, there might have been a chance for you. However, your current cultivation isn't even as great as mine. It would never be you. Bai Yu shot a glance at Jian Chen. Jian Chen smiled indifferently. He did not try to explain. At this moment, Donglin Yanxue had also stepped up onto the stage. She had been below the stage earlier, so she had clearly witnessed the bickering between the elders for the last spot. She could not help but feel troubled over this. Many of the elders eyed the last position. They wanted to take it and give it to the people they placed the highest hopes on or were the closest with. If she recommended a disciple with just a one-colored soul core at a time like this, she would definitely face the objection of all the elders. Even with her master helping her out, she probably would not be able to change the outcome. She had underestimated just how importantly the elders treated this spot. Donglin Yanxue bowed to the elders first. After a moment of hesitation, she said reluctantly, I hope I can give the last spot to Junior Changyang of the Soaring Clouds Peak. Bai Yu immediately became dumbfounded when she heard Donglin Yanxue's words. Her small mouth hung agape in disbelief. A strange expression covered the faces of many of the lords of the various peaks below. Changyang's name was renowned among the many mountains below the sacred hall. Even many peak lords knew his name. However, the elders on the stage all became confused. The Soaring Clouds Peak? Isn't the Lord of the Soaring Clouds Peak Han Exin? Who is Changyang? An elder asked in doubt. He had never heard of Changyang before. Afterwards, a peak lord immediately took the initiative to pass on everything he knew about Changyang to the elders. And I was wondering who this Changyang was. Turns out he's a weaker disciple. You're fooling around. You're basically fooling around. All protectors are hallowed saint masters with 7-colored soul cores. Why is a disciple with a mere 1-colored soul core being thrown into the mix blindly? The mission of the protector is to protect the candidates and take part in the trials. If a disciple with a 1-colored soul core becomes a protector, who is going to be the one protecting who? Aside from Donglin Yanxue's master, all the other elders objected vehemently after learning about Changyang's identity. Chapter 2290. Arresting Changyang on the stage, Donglin Yanxue felt very helpless as she listened to the objections. With the intense objection of so many elders, there was no hope even if her master had recommended Changyang herself. After all, Changyang was simply too weak. He only had a 1-colored soul core. With such puny cultivation, it was impossible for him to receive the focus or support of any elder. If he became a protector despite such a cultivation level, the candidate would be the one protecting him instead. Donglin Yanxue sighed gently. She had already tried her best and done everything that she could. However, she was still unable to change the ultimate outcome. When she thought of the pure soul Changyang had given to her prior to all this, Donglin Yanxue could not help but feel deeply ashamed. It would be rather difficult for her to face Changyang now. She had never thought that anything would change with the competition this time. In the past competitions, the 9 retainers would be completely up to the chosen saint after they were selected from the candidates. This was the chosen saint's right. However, the 9 retainers had all been chosen by the elders and the important members of those large clans this time. You're still thinking about Changyang? It's said that Changyang has already gone missing for a very long time. His situation is unknown. Let's ignore the fact that he might be dead right now. Even if he were in the Radiant Saint Hall, he would have no right to set foot in the Sacred Hall. Isn't it absolutely hilarious that a low-level disciple who can't even set foot in the Sacred Hall wants to be a retainer? At this moment, a voice rang out from below the stage. The white-clothed Gongjing Xian had called out fearlessly. Immediately, Gongjing Xian's voice spread across the entire square. All the hallowed saint masters gathered there heard his voice clearly. In the past 2 years, Gongjing Xian had been cultivating in seclusion. He had heard from his clan that they had already sent people to deal with Chang Yang. He was certain that Chang Yang was dead, as he refused to believe that a radiant saint master with a mere one-colored soul core could avoid being hunted down by the experts of his clan. He had only emerged yesterday, so he did not receive news of Chang Yang returning to the Radiant Saint Hall. Chang Yang doesn't even have the right to enter the sacred hall. It looks like he's just a weak disciple with no background. Not only is his puny cultivation, but he has no background either. He's just dreaming if he wants to become a retainer like that. Donglin Yanshue actually wants Chang Yang to be her 9th retainer. This sure is rather interesting. Gongjeng Xian's words immediately caused a discussion between the various peak lords in the surroundings. Many radiant god kings discussed the matter secretly. Jian Chen frowned slightly. His strength was far greater than most of the radiant god kings present. Moreover, after the changes to his soul, his senses had become astonishing as well. As a result, many of the secret messages were unable to escape his senses, allowing him to hear them clearly. A cold light shone through Jian Chen's eyes. He did not try to hide anymore. He called out, "Who says I don't have the right to enter the sacred hall?" Jian Chen was loud, so he immediately attracted everyone's gazes. At that moment, not only did the radiant god kings in the surroundings look over, but even the elders who stood on the stage cast their gazes towards Jian Chen. Naturally, Donglin Yanshue discovered Jian Chen in the crowd from the stage, and a sliver of surprise flashed through her eyes immediately. Clearly, she had no idea how Jian Chen had managed to appear in the sacred hall, as he should not have had the right to enter this place according to her understanding of him. "Chang Yang, it's you." Gongjeng Xian expanded the senses of his soul without any hesitation. When he discovered Jian Chen, he was dumbfounded. The fact that someone he believed to be dead was standing alive right there left him extremely surprised. However, soon afterwards, Gongjeng Xian called out with a sunken face, "Chang Yang, how did you enter the sacred hall? You have no right to be here." Before Jian Chen could reply, Gongjeng Xian immediately said to the elders on the stage, "Master, elders, Chang Yang has snuck his way into the sacred hall and has broken the rules of the Radiant Saint Hall. Please look into the matter, elders." On the stage, Donglin Yanshue's face changed slightly. She secretly became anxious for Jian Chen. The sacred hall was not a place that just anyone could enter. Even the peak lords could not set foot here without an important reason. If Chang Yang had really snuck in here, it would be a huge crime. "Oh dear. Oh no. Senior brother, what are you going to do now?" Bai Yu tugged Jian Chen's arm as she became anxious as well. She also believed that her senior brother had snuck in here because he indeed had no right to enter this place according to her understanding of him. Many of the elders on the stage became stern. They studied Jian Chen with piercing gazes as an invisible pressure gradually began to radiate from the stage. "Are you Chang Yang? Chang Yang, tell us the truth, how did you sneak in? If you don't give us a reasonable explanation, you're in deep trouble," Elder Mu Zhong said extremely sternly. Jian Chen remained calm. First, he clasped his fist at the stage before saying, "Disciple Chang Yang of the Soaring Clouds Peak greets the elders. Elder Mu Zhong, you've made it a little serious. I only have a one-colored soul core, so how would I be able to bypass the strict security? I would probably be arrested by the guards outside before I could even approach the sacred hall. Naturally, I entered here honestly." "Which one of you let Chang Yang into the sacred hall?" Elder Mu Zhong looked at the other elders on the stage at the same time as he extended the senses of his soul into the sacred hall and asked the other elders. The sacred hall was a sacred existence in the hearts of all radiant saint masters. It could not be infringed on at all. If a low-level disciple had really entered the sacred hall without permission, it would be a huge crime. He would not be spared easily. The other elders all shook their heads in response to the question. "Master, please help out Chang Yang. The favor I owe to Chang Yang is extremely great." Donglin Yanshue also realized the severity of the matter, so she quickly asked Mu Shui in secret. Mu Shui shook her head gently and said sternly, "Chang Yang's actions have infringed on the sacred hall. He has gone too far. I definitely cannot help him." Very soon, Elder Mu Zhong received the replies from the other elders. None of them had let Chang Yang into the hall. At that moment, Elder Mu Zhong's gaze became piercingly hostile. Guards, immediately arrest Chang Yang of the Soaring Clouds Peak for trespassing on the sacred hall, Elder Mu Zhong called out. Chapter 2291. Support with that, two violet-robed guards immediately flew towards Jian Qin emotionlessly. On the stage, Donglin Yanxue sighed gently. She looked at the guards approaching Jian Qin as she felt helpless from the bottom of her heart. She was one of the 5 candidates and possessed a certain level of status in the Radiant Saint Hall, but she was truly unable to help Jian Qin at a time like this. Oh no. Senior brother, what do we do? Bai Yu was filled with anxiety. She was very worried about what Jian Qin would soon face. As a disciple of an elder, she knew all the rules of the Radiant Saint Hall extremely well. She was extremely clear on the holiness of this sacred hall. Trespassing without permission was a huge crime, and the punishment would be exceedingly severe. Chang Yang, you didn't die outside, but I definitely won't let you have it easy in the future. However, what are the people in the clan doing? Didn't they say they sent experts to kill Chang Yang? How is he still alive? Gongjing Exin sneered as a cold light flashed through his eyes. This disciple called Chang Yang is in great trouble now. He only has a one-colored soul core, yet he dares to trespass on the sacred hall. That's infringing on the sacred hall. Not only will he be severely punished, but even the Lord of the Soaring Clouds Peak will be involved in the punishment as well. This is a lesson for us. When we go back, we must watch over our disciples in a stricter fashion, just in case disaster strikes unknowingly and we're dragged down by our disciples. At the same time, the Radiant God Kings present discussed the matter with one another secretly. By now, the two violet-robed guards had arrived before Jian Qin. A thick, metal chain had appeared in their hands. The chain was forged from a special type of metal, and various formations were engraved within it. Once it chained up someone, not only would it seal up their cultivation, but it would also become extremely heavy, making movement virtually impossible. Only those who had committed serious crimes in the Radiant Saint Hall would have to endure such a punishment. Hold on. Just when the guards were about to chain up Jian Qin, he suddenly called out. He indifferently stared at Elder Mu Zhong, who was on the stage, and said clearly, Elder Mu Zhong, may I ask how you have determined that I am trespassing on the sacred hall and that I must be arrested? You've entered the sacred hall without the permission of any elder. That is trespassing and a great crime, said Elder Mu Zhong. In other words, I need the permission of elders to enter the sacred hall, and even the medallion in my possession isn't enough for me to enter? Or perhaps, the right that this medallion gives me isn't as great as the permission from the elders, Jian Qin said clearly. Afterwards, he took out Xian Zhan's medallion with a flip of his hand and held it high above his head. When Elder Mu Zhong saw the medallion that symbolized a vice leader, he immediately shuddered. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed. Surprise filled his face. That's a vice leader's medallion. It's vice leader Xian Zhan. How is that possible? How does he possess vice leader Xian Zhan's medallion? What is his relationship with vice leader Xian Zhan? He's a Radiant Saint Master with a one-colored soul core and a nameless one at that. How does he have vice leader Xian Zhan's medallion? Not only did Elder Mu Zhong become surprised the moment he saw the medallion in Jian Qin's hand, but even the expressions of the other elders changed. They all revealed looks of disbelief. As for the Radiant God Kings below the stage, all their discussions stopped. Their gazes gathered on Jian Qin's hand, on the medallion that represented a vice leader. Their faces changed in an assortment of ways. A bizarre light filled Donglin Yanxue's eyes. She stared at the medallion in Jian Qin's hand as she became dumbfounded. Her gaze contained some doubt and confusion. The moment she saw the medallion, many questions crossed her mind. Since Chang Yang had a vice leader's medallion, he obviously had close ties to a vice leader. He could directly ask the vice leader in question if he wanted to enter the Tower of Radiance. Although the conditions for entering the Tower of Radiance were extremely strict, a vice leader could make an exception for any disciple with their authority. It would only be a matter of a few words. So, Why did Changyang offer her a precious pure soul and go to such great lengths to become her 9th retainer just to enter the Tower of Radiance? Suddenly, Donglin Yanxue discovered that she did not seem to understand Changyang's intentions at all. Yanxue, don't you understand? Changyang wants to become your 9th retainer because he wants to get close to you. Donglin Yanshue's master, Mu Shui, seemed to be able to see through everything. She secretly told Donglin Yanxue this. Donglin Yanxue thought through every detail of when she got to know Changyang. She missed nothing at all. In the end, she shook her head and replied, "No. Master, Changyang shouldn't be someone like that. I won't say anything more about whether it's true or not. You're clever, so you have your own judgment to make." Mu Shui said, "However, since Changyang bears the medallion of Vice Leader Xianzhan, it means he has the support of Vice Leader Xianzhan. With that being the case, his status is no less than yours in the Radiant Saint Hall. It might even surpass yours. Xianzhan is the strongest out of the 8 vice leaders. The other vice leaders all have to show some respect towards Vice Leader Xianzhan. As a result, if Changyang has Vice Leader Xianzhan's support, no one will be bold enough to provoke him in the Radiant Saint Hall." Mu Shui explained to Donglin Yanxue. She was trying to stimulate Donglin Yanshue's thoughts. Donglin Yanxue remained silent. She looked at Jian Chen in the crowd with mixed feelings. At that moment, she could not help but begin doubting Jian Chen's true intentions. Was it really like what her master said, and he did it to get close to her? After all, she was the female prodigy of the Radiant Saint Hall. There were countless people who pursued her, and she had already grown accustomed to such things. However, was Changyang one of them as well? Gongzhang Xian's expression immediately became extremely ugly, while Baiyu's face was filled with surprise and excitement. Elder Mu Zhong glanced at Jian Chen deeply from the stage. With his strength, he could naturally tell that Jian Chen's medallion was the real deal. Meanwhile, the 2 violet-robed guards backed off obediently after Jian Chen revealed the vice leader's medallion. This was because even elders had no right to judge and punish people who possessed a vice leader's medallion. Elder Mu Zhong's order was naturally useless now. "Since you possess a vice leader's medallion, you obviously have the right to enter the sacred hall," Elder Mu Zhong said to Jian Chen. Then he looked around and continued, "Let's continue to focus on the matter of the last protector." After a slight pause, he said, "After careful consideration, I have decided that the final protector will be the Lord of the Broken Blade." Elder Mu Zhong came to a halt halfway through his announcement of the final protector. Afterwards, respect that he rarely showed appeared on his face, and his old eyes were filled with extreme surprise. But very soon, Elder Mu Zhong recovered. He glanced at Jian Chen deeply once again and sucked in a deep breath. He announced, "I hereby announce that the 9th protector for Donglin Yanxue will be the disciple of the Soaring Clouds Peak, Changyang." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.